Introduction: The War No One Sees. You don't sabotage your life because you're weak. You sabotage your life because somewhere inside you, a part of you learned that safety comes from staying small. It's strange, isn't it? How we can want something with our whole chest: love, success, peace, and yet at the same time be the ones who quietly, cleverly, unconsciously destroy the path leading to it. It's like living with an invisible puppeteer, a shadow inside the mind pulling strings you don't remember giving it. You finally meet someone good. Suddenly you overthink everything. You start making money. Suddenly you take ridiculous risks. You try to change. Suddenly you don't feel motivated anymore. People call it procrastination, fear, laziness. But that's the surface-level illusion. Underneath, self-sabotage is a survival strategy that outlived its usefulness. It's an emotional reflex built in childhood. It's an identity that never updated. It's the nervous system refusing peace because chaos is what shaped it. It's a mind trained to avoid what it believes it doesn't deserve. This book is not about fixing yourself. You're not broken. This book is about unmasking the inner forces that push you away from the life you secretly know is yours. By the end, you'll understand why you fight your own progress, why comfort seduces you, why chaos feels familiar, why your current identity blocks your potential, and most importantly, how to become someone who no longer needs to self-sabotage to feel safe. Welcome to the hidden battlefield. Let's turn the lights on. Chapter 1: The Repetitive Tripping Over Life's Mistakes. A story of someone repeatedly making the same mistakes in relationships, money, and habits. Jenna seemed like an ordinary person, yet her life was marked by a pattern of repeated missteps that left her frequently frustrated and disillusioned. In her relationships, she often found herself drawn to partners who didn't treat her well. Despite her friends' warnings, she would ignore their advice, sweep red flags under the rug, and justify her choices with hope that things would change. Each relationship followed a familiar path: the initial excitement, an eventual breakup, and the cycle starting all over again with someone new, only to end in disappointment. This pattern extended beyond her love life. Jenna struggled just as much with her finances. Every month, she faced the same dilemma. She started with high hopes of saving, yet her love for shopping would take over. No matter how many budgeting apps she downloaded or how many financial tips she read, she'd find a way to spend beyond her means. She racked up credit card debt, promising herself each time it would be the last. Yet, the following month, she engaged in the same reckless spending. It seemed as if she was unknowingly trapped in a cycle that she couldn't break. Her habits were just as unpredictable. Jenna often committed to new goals, trying to get fit or read more books. She'd sign up for gym memberships or buy stacks of unread novels. Initially, she felt a surge of motivation, but this enthusiasm would quickly fade. She'd skip workouts, let her membership go unused, and let the unread books gather dust. Each failed attempt felt like another mark against her, leading to feelings of guilt and inadequacy. Yet, despite this pattern of failures, Jenna found herself pushing forward without grasping why she kept falling into these same traps. This constant cycle of mistakes Jenna encountered often stemmed from a deeper issue: self-sabotage. This unconscious mechanism operates like a safety net, keeping individuals in familiar, albeit unhealthy, situations. Many people, like Jenna, might mistake their ongoing struggles for carelessness or laziness. In truth, self-sabotage is often rooted in fear and anxiety. It creates a false sense of protection against potential failure. By remaining in familiar patterns, even if they are negative, individuals can avoid the discomfort of trying something new that may lead to failure. The concept of self-sabotage often manifests in various forms. For Jenna, it was the fear of vulnerability that drew her to unavailable partners, preventing her from connecting with people who could genuinely support her. Her spending habits represented a momentary relief for deeper internal struggles, providing a temporary escape from reality. When Jenna felt overwhelmed, the impulse to shop overwhelmed her rational thinking. This resulted in an even greater feeling of being trapped, financially and emotionally. Recognizing patterns of self-sabotage can be challenging. It requires a level of reflection that many avoid. However, understanding why these patterns persist is vital for growth. For Jenna, acknowledging her deep-seated fears, such as fear of rejection or discomfort with change, could serve as the first step towards breaking these cycles. By learning to confront uncomfortable feelings rather than avoiding them, Jenna had the opportunity to respond differently in future situations. Breaking free from these damaging patterns demands more than awareness. It requires a plan. Jenna needed to reflect on her previous choices and identify states of mind leading to such outcomes. Setting small, achievable goals could help her redirect her path. Gaining control over her finances didn't mean eliminating fun. It meant finding balance. Moments of joy could exist alongside thoughtful budgeting, making her feel more secure. It's helpful to establish a support system for accountability and encouragement. Friends or family understand Jenna's goals can provide valuable insights and hold her accountable. Keeping a journal to track her feelings and experiences could also help her see patterns as they arise. By doing so, Jenna might gain clarity on her fears and resist impulsive decisions leading her back into those familiar cycles. As experiences unfold, it's essential to be patient with oneself. Change won't happen overnight. Recognizing mistakes takes time, and moments of relapse may occur. It's a part of the journey of self-discovery and healing. Each time Jenna stumbles, she can choose to analyze what might have triggered her actions rather than spiral into self-blame. Understanding self-sabotage as an unconscious mechanism, not stupidity or laziness. Imagine Sarah, who has struggled for years with relationships that never seem to last. She meets people, feels a spark, and invests herself fully, only to find that patterns of mistrust, withdrawal, or self-doubt creep in and push her partners away. On the surface, it might look like she's choosing the wrong people or failing to communicate well. Yet, what's more puzzling is that Sarah notices similar patterns in her finances. Despite wanting stability, she repeatedly makes impulsive purchases or avoids budgeting altogether. Her habits don't stop there. She promises herself to exercise regularly, but quickly falls back into inactivity. Many around her have labeled Sarah as careless or lazy, but she feels stuck in a cycle she can't explain. What Sarah experiences is far from unique. Many people encounter these repeating patterns across different parts of life without recognizing what drives them. The frustration builds, and self-judgment follows, which only makes it harder to break free. Sarah's story is an example of how self-sabotage often plays out silently, masking itself as poor choices or laziness, but hiding deep, unseen currents. Without understanding why these patterns repeat, it's easy to assume blame and miss the chance to heal the real causes beneath the surface. Self-sabotage is usually misinterpreted as a lack of willpower, intelligence, or motivation. It might seem like someone is deliberately undermining their own progress simply because they are careless or lazy. But self-sabotage functions differently. Instead of a conscious decision, it often works entirely outside of awareness, acting as a defense mechanism that protects a person from deeper emotional pain or fear. When the mind perceives an internal threat, it may trigger behaviors that seem irrational or damaging, but serve to keep that underlying fear out of conscious view. At its core, self-sabotage roots itself in subconscious beliefs formed through past experiences. For example, If someone grew up in an environment where success was met with criticism or abandonment, their mind might associate achievement with danger. The unconscious then creates patterns that prevent success to avoid triggering those painful memories again. This doesn't make a person stupid or lazy. It means their inner world is trying to protect them in the only way it knows. Self-sabotage can show up as procrastination, self-doubt, fear of failure, or even behaviors that push others away, all driven by fears they might not fully recognize. These unconscious drivers can explain why people like Sarah find themselves trapped in cycles that feel impossible to break. It isn't a lack of effort that holds them back, but rather old fears compelling them to act in ways that maintain an illusion of safety, even at the cost of their happiness and goals. Understanding this frees a person from harsh self-judgment and opens the door to curiosity about those hidden fears and patterns. It's a chance to shift from blame toward compassion and, eventually, change. Recognizing self-sabotage as an unconscious mechanism offers a practical way forward. Instead of fighting the patterns with willpower alone, it helps to gently bring attention to the fears and beliefs underneath. This can be done through reflective practices like journaling or therapy, where awareness slowly grows and the mind learns new ways to respond to old triggers. Change often begins with patience and kindness to oneself, as the unconscious mind needs time to trust that it is safe to let go of protective behaviors. This approach creates space for healthier habits, relationships, and choices to develop naturally over time. Relatable examples: quitting diets early, ending good opportunities due to feelings of too good. Sarah has tried countless diets and new career paths. Each time she feels confident and motivated at first, but somewhere along the way, she somehow finds a way to stop. She might skip a few workouts, binge on unhealthy food, or simply convince herself she's not cut out for change. At work, she might turn down a promotion or an exciting project, feeling she's not deserving or worried she might fail. Despite her efforts, Sarah keeps cycling back to her old habits, feeling frustrated and confused. Why does she sabotage her own progress? She doesn't realize that many of these actions stem from subconscious beliefs and patterns that she's not aware of. Her mindset is quietly shaping her choices, often in ways she can't see clearly. This cyclical behavior isn't just about determination. There's a deeper part of her mind at play, steering her away from success and stability. People like Sarah often overlook how much their unconscious mind influences decisions. These patterns are built over years of experience, fears, and beliefs, many of which operate below conscious awareness. Without understanding what drives these reactions, breaking free from the cycle becomes harder. Recognizing that she's repeatedly stopping herself can feel like a puzzle. She might not realize she's doing it because her subconscious is trying to protect her from change that feels risky or unfamiliar. Sometimes, the reasons behind quitting early or avoiding good opportunities seem irrational when viewed from the outside. Yet, they often stem from a sense of unworthiness, fear of success, or the belief that success might bring unwanted attention or change. These thoughts create a mental barrier that feels uncomfortable or even threatening. For Sarah, finishing a diet plan or accepting a new job might suddenly seem like more than she can handle, so her mind persuades her to retreat into familiar, safe patterns. Self-sabotage is often misunderstood as laziness or lack of discipline, but it's more about protecting oneself from perceived danger. When success feels too big or too good, it can trigger fear. The mind might think, if I succeed, I might be exposed or judged. To avoid that uncomfortable feeling, it unconsciously nudges the person to cut things short, abandon goals, or stay within comfortable limits. This way, the person avoids facing possible failure or criticism, even if those fears are irrational or based on past experiences. Quitting a diet early is a common example. If someone starts with enthusiasm but then quickly loses motivation, it's often because deep down, they feel guilty or unworthy of that health or happiness. Maybe they think, I don't really deserve to look or feel this good. So their subconscious urges them to sabotage progress. Similarly, when a great opportunity arises, like a new job, a promotion, or a relationship, they might instinctively pull back, thinking they aren't truly good enough or fearing they'll mess things up. This behavior is also linked to avoiding success because it challenges a person's identity. If someone has always seen themselves as someone who struggles or fails, succeeding can feel like a threat to that core belief. So, they unconsciously create obstacles, whether by procrastinating, second-guessing themselves, or outright quitting. It's not a sign of weakness, but a defense mechanism designed to keep them safe from the discomfort of breaking old patterns. A practical way to recognize this pattern is to notice when you tend to get close to a goal and then suddenly pull away. Thinking about whether your fears of deserving success or the discomfort of change are behind these moments can help. Usually, these feelings aren't logical. They're rooted in past experiences and subconscious beliefs you may not even be aware of. Becoming aware of this pattern allows you to challenge it and choose differently. One helpful tip is to pay attention to your inner dialogue during times of progress. When you notice yourself thinking, I don't really deserve this, or I'll only mess it up, pause and ask, is this true, or is this fear talking? Challenging those thoughts can weaken their hold. Over time, learning to recognize these unconscious drivers gives you more control, helping you stay committed to your goals even when discomfort or self-doubt appears. Chapter 2. The Inner Critic. How the inner voice was formed by past experiences, parents, school, trauma, social pressure. Consider the story of Alex, who finds himself caught in a cycle of broken relationships, mounting debts, and unhealthy habits. Each time he begins to trust a partner, doubts creep in, and he pushes them away. Financially, he makes plans to save but ends up spending impulsively. At work, he starts new habits with enthusiasm but quickly falls back into old, unproductive routines. Each setback leaves him scratching his head, wondering why he can't seem to break free from these patterns. The confusion is compounded by the feeling that he should know better, as if the answers were right in front of him, yet just out of reach. These sequences have roots deep in his past. Growing up, Alex faced a mix of encouragement and criticism from his parents. His achievements were often overshadowed by their high expectations, leading him to internalize a voice that constantly reminded him of his inadequacies. The pressure to excel left him with a lingering fear of failure, so when relationships or finances started to falter, the inner critic took center stage, convincing him that he wasn't worthy of success or love. Over time, this voice reshaped his perceptions and actions without him realizing. Self-sabotage often operates under the radar, driven not by laziness or stupidity, but by complex psychological mechanisms. This behavior can stem from childhood experiences, particularly those that involve trauma or high stress. For Alex, each time he felt like he was on the brink of something better, whether that was a relationship, a new job, or a healthier lifestyle, the familiar fear associated with failing would surface. His actions, while seemingly irrational, were actually rooted in a deep-seated desire to protect himself from the very pain he feared facing. It's as if his mind had crafted a protective shield, allowing him to avoid potential hurt, but at the expense of opportunity and growth. This cycle of self-sabotage can often leave individuals feeling lost, as they are doing things that seem to undermine their goals. The critical inner voice reminds them of past failures with comments like, "You always mess things up," or "Why bother trying?" This deluge of negative reinforcement can be crippling. Over time, the brain begins to associate success with discomfort, leading to a habitual retreat from anything that resembles progress. Understanding that this response is more about self-protection than failure is essential for breaking the cycle. Recognizing the patterns of thought and behavior as products of past experiences offers a crucial step toward change. Alex's journey illuminates how revisiting these underlying beliefs can be transformative. Connecting with a therapist or counselor can pave the way toward understanding and reshaping the inner dialogue. Instead of allowing the inner voice to dictate feelings of unworthiness, turning to affirmations and positive self-talk can gradually replace the negativity. Practical exercises such as journaling about accomplishments or setting small, achievable goals can help refocus energy in a more constructive direction. Through this process, individuals begin to rewrite their narratives, offering a new perspective on who they are and what they can achieve. Mistaking the critic for an objective truth, internal dialogue, and perceptions. Sarah had always found herself trapped in a pattern. Every few months, she would enter a new relationship, hopeful and eager to make things work, only to feel disappointment and frustration again. Financial struggles followed a similar rhythm. She would budget carefully for a few weeks, only to fall back into overspending and debt. Even her habits, like trying to quit smoking or stick to an exercise routine, seemed to fail repeatedly despite her best intentions. What puzzled her most was her inability to understand why these patterns kept happening, as if she was fighting against herself without knowing why. One evening, after yet another argument with her partner over money and trust, Sarah found herself replaying all those internal conversations she had throughout the day. The voice inside her head was harsh, often critical, whispering things like you'll never get it right, or you're just not good enough. It was almost as if that inner voice was trying to convince her to accept failure as inevitable. She hadn't realized how much she was mistaking that harsh critic for an objective truth, letting it shape how she saw herself and her choices. The cycle continued because she accepted this inner dialogue as fact, rather than as a reflection of deep-seated fears and doubts. Many people, like Sarah, struggle with behaviors that seem self-defeating, and it's easy to blame themselves for lack of discipline or intelligence. Yet, self-sabotage is rarely about being careless or lazy. It often comes from an unconscious place where old fears and limiting beliefs hide. These internal critics are like internal security systems gone wrong, set up to protect us, but instead holding us back. For example, the fear of failure might disguise itself as procrastination or quitting too soon. The underlying belief might be that if I don't try my hardest, I won't be hurt as much if I fail. This critic inside us often masks itself as objective truth, a voice stating facts when it's really interpreting events through a lens colored by past experiences and emotional wounds. This makes it difficult to separate what's true from what's a distorted perception. Recognizing that this inner dialogue is shaped by fears can change how we respond to it. Instead of accepting those harsh judgments, we can start questioning where they come from and whether they are really true. Over time, this approach can help loosen the hold those negative voices have, freeing us from repeating the same painful patterns again and again. Understanding the role of internal dialogue in shaping our perceptions is crucial. It's not just about what happens to us, but how we interpret those events internally. When we mistake the critic's voice for the truth, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy, setting ourselves up for failure. Recognizing these internal dynamics is the first step toward shifting the patterns and creating space for more compassionate and constructive self-talk. Real-life examples: hearing you re not good enough before trying, emotional impact. Think about Sarah, a young woman who always dreamed of starting her own business. Every time she took a step forward, doubts crept in, and she'd hear a voice in her head whisper, "You're not good enough." These words weren't spoken aloud by others, but they echoed from her own inner critic, rooted in past comments from family or teachers. Each failed attempt to launch her business felt like validation of those words, deepening her fears and making her doubt her own abilities. Over time, she started avoiding opportunities altogether, believing she simply wasn't cut out for success. Her experience is common. Many people face internal messages that sabotage their efforts before they even begin. Many individuals grow up hearing dismissive comments from people they trust or respect. Someone might hear that they're not smart enough, not talented enough, or not worthy. These negative messages can become internalized, creating a barrier to trying new things. Take James, for example, who wanted to learn a new language. When he shared his goal, a relative said, "You'll never be fluent. You're terrible at languages." That comment stayed with him, influencing his confidence. Even after years, he hesitated to start practicing, fearing failure. These words stick because they feed into our deepest fears and insecurities, often before we even try to prove ourselves wrong. The emotional toll of hearing "you're not good enough" can be overwhelming. It causes feelings of inadequacy, shame, and frustration. For many, it's a constant internal battle, one side urging them to try, the other side telling them they'll fail. Over time, this internal conflict erodes self-esteem and makes the idea of trying seem pointless or terrifying. For example, Lisa struggled with her artistic talents, ever since a teacher told her she was not talented enough to pursue art seriously. Those words haunted her, and although she loved painting, she stopped trying altogether. She felt a deep sense of loss, fearing that her efforts would only lead to disappointment, so she avoided putting herself out there. Hearing "you're not good enough" does not only undermine confidence, but also triggers emotional reactions that can last a lifetime. It can lead to anxiety, depression, or a chronic sense of unworthiness. Sometimes, people develop defense mechanisms, avoiding situations where they might fail or be judged, self-sabotaging their progress, or settling for less than they deserve. These responses often come from a desire to protect oneself from pain, believing that if they don't try at all, they won't face failure or rejection. For instance, Mark wanted to ask for a promotion at work, but the fear of rejection and being told he wasn't suitable stopped him. When this happens repeatedly, it chips away at hope and resilience, making any attempt at growth seem even more daunting. Understanding that these negative messages are often rooted in past experiences rather than current reality is crucial. Many of the voices telling us we're not enough are echoes of old comments that no longer serve us. Recognizing them can be the first step in resisting their power. Practice catching these thoughts when they arise, and challenge them with evidence of your strengths and accomplishments. If someone told you you're not good enough, remember that everyone has their own journey, and setbacks are simply part of growth. Building awareness and compassion for yourself can help break the chain of emotional impact these words cause, making it easier to take the first step toward your goals despite the internal doubts. Chapter 3: Trauma Loops. Using the metaphor of emotional software running outdated code. Imagine Sarah, a talented graphic designer, who often finds herself in a cycle of unfulfilling relationships. She meets someone new, feels hopeful, and yet, before long, the same issues arise: miscommunication, lack of trust, and ultimately, separation. Each time, she wonders what went wrong, why she keeps falling into this familiar pattern. Sarah tries to change her approach. She reads self-help books and attends workshops. Yet, when the next opportunity arises, she finds herself making the same choices and experiencing the same disappointments. This cycle of self-sabotage is frustrating and confusing for her. It's as if something deep within her prevents her from breaking free, trapping her in an emotional loop. Think of emotions and beliefs like software running on a computer. Just like any software, if it's outdated, it struggles to perform efficiently. Sarah's subconscious holds onto outdated emotional code, shaped by past traumas and unresolved experiences. These experiences serve as the operating system for her emotional reactions. For instance, if she was betrayed in a previous relationship, that painful experience might become a line of code that automatically triggers her insecurities in a new relationship. Even when she meets someone trustworthy, part of her software continues to operate under that outdated belief, leading her to act defensively or suspiciously. Much like a computer that keeps crashing because of its old software, Sarah's emotional life is filled with bugs that prevent her from functioning properly in new situations. The great irony here is that she actively tries to rewrite this code. She consciously wants to trust and to love freely, but her emotional software still runs on the programming from previous experiences. This results in her sabotaging relationships before they have the chance to flourish. It's a frustrating cycle, and one that many people may find familiar. To overcome this, one must engage in updating the emotional software. This could mean revisiting past traumas in a safe environment, allowing oneself to feel the emotions tied to those experiences, or challenging the outdated beliefs that have been formed. Therapy, support groups, or self-reflection can act as the developers that help rewrite that emotional code, allowing for new experiences to be processed differently. When Sarah learns to identify when her old software is running and chooses to engage differently, she begins to rewrite the code of her emotional responses, paving the way for healthier relationships. For those experiencing similar cycles of self-sabotage, it's beneficial to take a moment to reflect on the emotional patterns at play. Journaling can be a powerful tool in identifying these patterns and the beliefs that reinforce them. By consciously writing out thoughts and feelings, it becomes easier to see connections and begin the process of updating your emotional software. Every small step toward understanding and change is a step toward breaking free from outdated coding. How childhood wounds shape adult behavior patterns. There's a story about a woman named Sarah who found herself trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. Over and over, she entered into relationships where she felt overlooked or unappreciated. Financially, she struggled to save money and often made impulsive purchases that left her stressed. Her daily habits reflected a deep sense of restlessness and dissatisfaction, yet she couldn't quite understand why these patterns kept repeating. Sarah's experience is common. Many people repeat behaviors in relationships, finances, or personal habits without recognizing the original source of those patterns. Often, the roots stretch back to early childhood experiences that shaped how they view themselves and the world. Sarah's story is not just about bad luck or poor decision-making. Instead, it reveals how childhood wounds can guide adult behavior without conscious awareness. When children grow up with unmet needs, criticism, or neglect, they develop internal scripts to survive. These scripts become automatic responses that influence how they relate to others and make choices as adults, even if those responses no longer serve them well. The patterns seem involuntary, like a pull they can't control. This can happen without realizing the connection, making it frustrating and confusing when similar problems keep emerging repeatedly across different parts of life. Many adults carry invisible scars from their early years, even if their memories are hazy or incomplete. For example, a person who grew up in an unpredictable environment might struggle with trust and feel anxious about stability in relationships and finances. Another who was constantly criticized might avoid risk-taking, fearing failure or rejection. These early experiences program a set of survival behaviors, sometimes rigid and deeply ingrained, that replay in adulthood. They don't disappear just because circumstances change, which explains why people like Sarah keep encountering the same obstacles or patterns despite new situations and efforts to move forward. Self-sabotage is one way these childhood wounds express themselves. It's often misunderstood as laziness, lack of willpower, or foolishness, but it's much more complex. What looks like undermining one's own success is frequently an unconscious response rooted in past emotional pain. The mind protects itself by avoiding situations that feel threatening, even if they offer opportunity. This defense mechanism developed as a survival tool during difficult times when the child lacked control or safety. It helps explain why someone might reject a good relationship, sabotage a career opportunity, or engage in destructive habits despite knowing the consequences. Unpacking these behaviors reveals that self-sabotage is less about failing and more about protecting a vulnerable part of the self. When an individual's early environment was unpredictable or painful, the brain builds patterns aimed at limiting harm, even if those patterns now hold them back from growth and happiness. It's like an old habit formed to avoid danger that no longer applies, but still feels urgent and automatic. Understanding this helps shift blame away from the person and toward understanding the origins of the behavior. It also opens the door to healing, where new choices can be made with compassion and awareness. Recognizing that these adult behaviors stem from childhood wounds empowers individuals to approach change differently. Instead of trying to fight or shame themselves for recurring patterns, they can work to gently identify the triggers. This might involve reflecting on what emotional needs were unmet or which fears drive seemingly self-defeating actions. From there, developing new habits becomes a process of slowly rewiring these old survival instincts with healthier, more conscious responses. Therapy, supportive relationships, and intentional self-reflection often play key roles in this work, helping people replace automatic reactions with deliberate choices that reflect their true needs and values. A practical tip for anyone noticing repeated mistakes or self-sabotaging tendencies is to pause and ask what early messages or experiences might be influencing their behavior now. Journaling about childhood memories, emotions, and current struggles together can shed light on these hidden connections. Recognizing the source of the behavior reduces its power and gives space for new patterns to form. Change doesn't happen overnight, but consistent self-awareness and kindness toward oneself can gradually transform wounds into wisdom, freeing individuals from the past's unconscious hold. Examples: avoiding intimacy because of past abandonment, grounded in compassionate explanation. Many people find themselves stuck in patterns of avoiding close relationships, often without fully realizing why. Take Sarah, for example. She repeatedly finds herself in new relationships, but then pulls away just as things begin to get serious. She always has excuses, being too busy, needing space, or feeling overwhelmed. But deep down, it's often rooted in a fear that she will be abandoned again. Despite wanting connection, she subconsciously structures her defenses to prevent herself from getting vulnerable and potentially hurt. It's as if her mind is trying to protect her from a pain she already knows too well, yet in doing so, she also blocks out the possibility of genuine, fulfilling relationships. This pattern isn't uncommon. Many individuals who have experienced abandonment or losses early in life develop what looks like a reluctance to be close. They might emotional withdraw whenever intimacy deepens because their past experiences have wired them to believe that closeness inevitably leads to pain. They don't consciously decide to avoid love. Instead, their subconscious thoughts and feelings drive their behaviors, sometimes in ways they can't initially recognize. This avoidance becomes a shield, a way of saying, if I never get too close, I can't get hurt. The irony is that this very strategy prevents them from experiencing the support and connection that could help heal old wounds. Understanding this doesn't mean blaming someone for their reactions. Instead, it offers an explanation rooted in human survival. Our minds are wired to protect us. When someone experiences abandonment or betrayal at a young age, it can create a core belief that they are unworthy of love or that relationships are inherently unsafe. Over time, these beliefs shape behaviors, including avoiding intimacy. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward healing. It's important to see that these reactions are not simply about personal choices, but are often deeply ingrained coping mechanisms that served a purpose once, even if they now hinder relationships in adult life. For someone struggling with avoiding intimacy, a helpful approach is to gently explore their fears and beliefs about abandonment. Grounding in compassion helps reduce shame and opens the door to understanding these reactions as protective rather than personal flaws. Techniques like mindfulness, journaling about fears, or talking with a therapist can help uncover hidden beliefs and gradually shift behaviors. Small steps, such as sharing feelings or building trust slowly, can eventually help break the cycle. Giving oneself patience and kindness during this process is crucial because healing from past wounds takes time and gentle persistence. It's useful to remember that avoidance isn't a fixed trait. It's a pattern rooted in past experiences that can change with awareness and effort. Recognizing that fear of abandonment is at the core of avoiding intimacy allows individuals to approach their feelings with curiosity rather than judgment. Saying to oneself, "This fear makes sense given my history," can create space for compassion. Over time, creating new experiences of safety and connection can help rewire the brain's response to closeness, making it less threatening and more welcoming. Small acts of vulnerability, practiced consistently, pave a pathway toward more secure and fulfilling relationships. Understanding your own fears and reactions, instead of fighting them, is a powerful step forward. One practical tip is to imagine a trusted friend or yourself in a compassionate role when fears surface. What would you say to that person? Often, offering ourselves kind, reassuring words helps soothe the inner critic and reduces the intensity of avoidance. Remember, healing doesn't mean erasing all fears, but learning to manage and coexist with them in a way that allows growth and connection to flourish. Chapter 4. The Fear of Success. Distinguishing the fear of success from fear of failure. Focusing on responsibility, visibility, change. The fear of success often arises from the pressure of increased responsibility. People may worry that achieving their goals will come with expectations that they feel ill-equipped to meet. This can lead to feelings of anxiety and self-doubt, prompting individuals to avoid taking steps toward success. For instance, someone promoted to a leadership role might fear that they won't be able to manage the team effectively, so they might shy away from pursuing opportunities that would advance their career. This desire to remain in a comfortable position can result in sabotaging their own efforts, whether through procrastination or a reluctance to embrace new challenges. Visibility is another key aspect of the fear of success. When individuals achieve their goals, they naturally attract attention, which can feel overwhelming. This spotlight can amplify self-doubt, as they may fear criticism or judgment from others. For example, a public speaker who lands a big gig might worry about performing poorly, leading them to hesitate or even decline the opportunity. The anxiety about being seen and evaluated can hinder personal growth, making individuals retreat from situations where they might shine. This retreat is often subconscious. They might choose to stay in their comfort zone instead of risking exposure to potential scrutiny or failure. The fear of failure typically revolves around the idea of inadequacy and the possible repercussions of not meeting expectations. It can manifest as a fear of judgment, loss of reputation, or feeling unworthy. Many individuals are driven by the need to avoid failure at all costs, which can cause them to stick to safe choices that don't challenge their abilities. On the other hand, the fear of success is rooted in the anxiety that accompanies achieving one's goals. This fear can stem from an internal struggle with self-worth and a desire to remain humble. Individuals may find it easier to dismiss their potential achievements, convincing themselves that they are not ready for the changes that success brings. Understanding these differences is crucial for personal development. The fear of success often pushes people to self-sabotage, while the fear of failure creates a freeze response, stopping individuals in their tracks. Both fears can create a cycle that keeps individuals from pursuing their true ambitions. Identifying which fear resonates more strongly can help individuals tackle the underlying issues in their lives. Simple strategies, such as reframing negative thoughts or visualizing success, can help break the cycle and encourage individuals to embrace change while managing responsibility and visibility. Psychological reasons why success can feel unsafe or overwhelming. Imagine someone who keeps facing the same kinds of problems despite their best efforts to move forward. They might finally get a raise or land a new job, but soon enough, they find themselves caught in old patterns, falling into familiar relationship complications, making poor financial choices, or slipping back into unhealthy habits. This repeated cycle isn't about lack of effort or intelligence. It's often the result of unconscious self-sabotage. The person wants success, yet somehow, their actions push them back into discomfort, confusion, or stress. It's as if there's an invisible force pulling them away from stability whenever things start to improve. Whether it's breaking up with a partner just when things get serious or spending impulsively despite a growing bank balance, these choices feel less like mistakes and more like a defense against something deeper. This kind of pattern shows up in many areas of life and often confuses people who can't understand why they just can't keep their achievements. The tendency isn't about being careless or lazy. It's tied to an inner sense that success might be dangerous, or at least unsettling. When someone pushes for progress, they may unknowingly trigger fears that haven't been addressed. This can lead to a kind of push-pull relationship with success where the initial excitement melts into anxiety, self-doubt, or even shame, causing a retreat to what feels safer, even if it's unproductive or harmful. The roots of feeling unsafe or overwhelmed by success often trace back to underlying fears that have nothing to do with ability or effort. Many people carry hidden beliefs about what they deserve or what will happen if they actually succeed. For example, someone might worry that achieving a goal will change how others see them or raise expectations they don't feel ready to meet. These are emotional weights tied to success that can cause confusion and hesitation. Fear of failure is a common reason, but there's also fear of what comes after success. Some may fear that if they stand out, they will be rejected or isolated. Others might worry about maintaining their progress and feel overwhelmed by the pressure to keep performing at a high level. These emotional responses stem from past experiences, messages from family or society, or even early childhood memories. Over time, the brain learns to link success with threats to safety, which triggers a survival response, resistance, avoidance, or self-sabotage. For many, self-sabotage isn't about laziness or incompetence, it's about protection. Pursuing success can make people vulnerable in ways they didn't expect. It can expose them to feelings of not fitting in, fear of being judged, or losing control. When these feelings surface, the subconscious mind may push back by creating distractions, doubts, or bad decisions that keep people from moving forward. In this way, the mind tries to protect the individual from emotional discomfort, even if it means standing in the way of actual success. Understanding this helps to see self-sabotage not as a personal failure, but as a signal. These signals point to parts of our inner world, such as unresolved fears or limiting beliefs, that need attention. A person who feels overwhelmed by success can benefit from recognizing these fears and gently working to address them. This process might involve reflecting on what success means personally, identifying which fears are holding them back, and learning new ways to cope with the emotional pressure that success can bring. Success then starts to feel less like a threat and more like a realistic, manageable achievement. One practical approach is to take success in smaller steps. Instead of aiming for a giant leap, Breaking goals into achievable parts can soften the fear of overwhelming expectations. This reduces the feeling that everything is riding on one moment of success. Alongside this, focusing on self-compassion helps ease internal criticism and reinforces the idea that it's okay to grow at a comfortable pace. These small shifts can make a surprising difference in how safe and confident someone feels as they pursue their goals. Examples: sabotaging opportunities because winning triggers fear. Imagine someone like Sarah, who repeatedly misses out on promotions even though she works hard and is qualified. She might tell herself she's just not lucky or that luck isn't on her side. But beneath that story, there's often a deeper fear at play. Sarah might unconsciously believe that success could bring harsher expectations, more responsibility, or even change her sense of identity. Instead of embracing opportunities, she subconsciously pushes them away, fearing what might come if she actually wins. This kind of self-sabotage often isn't deliberate. It's rooted in a fear of failure, but even more so in a fear of success. Success can feel unpredictable, and for some, it's terrifying to step into a new level of visibility or achievement. When people view winning as a potential loss, losing their current comfort zone, or facing new challenges, they might act in ways that prevent those wins from happening. It's like a built-in alarm system that triggers when things start looking promising. Take the example of someone who hesitates to speak up in meetings despite having good ideas. They fear that if they share their thought and it's wrong, they'll be judged or criticized. The fear isn't about the mistake itself, but about how it might change how others see them or how they see themselves. To avoid that risk, they remain silent, missing an opportunity to stand out or be recognized. This pattern repeats because the fear of exposure or failure feels so intense that it overrides the desire to succeed. Many people also sabotage opportunities by procrastinating or avoiding situations where success could be possible. Perhaps they get a big project assignment that could lead to a promotion, but they find ways to delay starting it or convince themselves they're not ready. It's not laziness. It's a fear that if the project goes well, they'll have to step into a new role, which might be uncomfortable. The mind prefers staying in familiar territory, even if it means missing growth opportunities. Another common example is people who self-edit their ambitions. They may secretly wish for a higher position or a different career, but tell themselves they're not suited or that it's unrealistic. When they get a chance at advancement, they might find reasons to decline or to underplay their abilities. This way, they keep themselves from reaching a new level that could challenge their sense of security or identity. Their fear of the unknown often outweighs their desire for success. Sometimes, the fear of winning shows up as damaging relationships or burning bridges just before success. Someone might intentionally or subconsciously sabotage a promising collaboration or walk away from opportunities that could elevate them because they fear being vulnerable or dependent on others. They associate winning with giving up control or exposing themselves to risks they're uncomfortable handling. This self-protective instinct keeps them stuck in a cycle of stagnation. Fear-driven sabotage can also be seen in environments where achievements are met with envy or resentment. A person might hold back their success because they dread how colleagues will react. Instead of sharing their accomplishments, they downplay or hide their wins, believing that standing out could lead to backlash. In doing so, they unconsciously keep themselves from moving forward and gaining the recognition they deserve. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to overcoming them. Understanding that the fear of winning is often a defense mechanism can help people start to challenge those beliefs and behaviors. Instead of viewing success as a threat, it's possible to see it as a natural step in personal growth. A practical tip is to consciously reflect on what makes success uncomfortable, whether it's fear of change, judgment, or losing control, and work on gradually facing those fears. Small wins can help rewire the mind to see success as a positive and safe experience. Chapter 5. Comfort Addiction. Modern metaphors: scrolling, gaming, food, binge-watching Netflix. There is a woman named Sarah who often found herself scrolling aimlessly through social media at night. Each time she promised herself she would stop after just a few minutes. Yet a couple of hours later, she was still glued to her screen, watching the same posts cycle through. She would see friends posting about their lives, which made her feel both entertained and somewhat inadequate. This routine became a nightly occurrence, and like clockwork, she'd wake up feeling sluggish and guilty about yet another lost night. Sarah also struggled with her work-life balance. Every Monday morning, she felt a wave of anxiety as she faced her to-do list. Instead of tackling her tasks head-on, she would often open a video game on her console. She thought just one quick session would help clear her mind, but hours soon vanished as she was absorbed in virtual quests. Time slipped away while she misplaced her focus, often leading to missed deadlines and increased stress. Despite her awareness of these patterns, she felt unable to break free. Sarah's experiences reflect a broader trend seen today, where many engage in comfort addictions. Scrolling through social media has become a way to escape reality, much like clicking through endless channels on TV. It's an unconscious habit, one that draws individuals in with the promise of connection and entertainment, but often leaves them feeling hollow when they log off. The cycle repeats time after time as they seek out quick satisfaction from distant friends, celebrities, or viral trends, only to find themselves feeling increasingly isolated. Gaming offers a similar yet distinct comfort. For many, it serves as a refuge from the everyday grind. Gamers immerse themselves in intricate storylines and challenges that provide an instant sense of accomplishment. This may feel rewarding, but the time spent in front of the screen can lead to missed opportunities. While the virtual world may offer a temporary escape, it often comes at the cost of time and focus that could be directed toward personal growth or goal achievement. We can't overlook binge-watching Netflix either. A single episode can turn into an entire season before viewers realize what has happened. This behavior taps into emotional responses, providing comfort through storylines and characters that engross them temporarily. While it might be a nice way to unwind, asking oneself whether this indulgence is replacing real-life connections or activities is crucial. It is easy to use content as a blanket, warming ourselves with engaging performances while avoiding our reality. Overeating is another form of this comfort addiction. People often turn to food not just for nourishment, but as a source of emotional relief. Stress, boredom, or loneliness can compel someone to seek out snacks or meals that bring them momentary gratification. This pattern often leads to feelings of guilt and physical discomfort, perpetuating a cycle of reliance on food as comfort instead of confronting the stressors at hand. Understanding why we reach for food during uncomfortable moments can lead to healthier coping mechanisms. Each of these behaviors represents emotional distractions that can keep individuals trapped in their familiar routines. The challenge lies in recognizing these patterns and being willing to change them. Small steps, like setting specific time limits for social media or gaming, can create distance from these habits. Rather than indulging in back-to-back episodes, try watching a single show and investing a few minutes in journaling afterward. This not only breaks the binge-watching cycle, but also promotes self-awareness and reflection on what emotions or needs were addressed during that time. By building new routines that encourage connection with ourselves and others, it's possible to replace these comfort addictions with healthier habits that enrich our lives. How comfort becomes a prison and inhibits growth. Imagine a person who keeps making the same mistakes in their life. Maybe it's missing deadlines, avoiding difficult conversations, or falling back into unhealthy habits. Each time, they promise themselves things will be different, but eventually, the same patterns emerge. This cycle can feel frustrating and confusing. Why do we keep stumbling over the same obstacles even when we want to move forward? This repetition often happens without our conscious awareness, trapping us inside familiar routines that feel safe but ultimately limit us. This situation is a clear example of how comfort can turn into a prison. When someone slips into familiar behaviors, even if those behaviors don't serve them well, it's because stepping outside the comfort zone feels too risky or overwhelming. The familiarity of those old patterns acts like a cushion against uncertainty. But instead of providing freedom, this cushion can become a barrier to real change and growth. Behind these repeated mistakes and the pull of familiar comfort lies a deeper psychological force known as self-sabotage. This is not about being lazy or unintelligent, as people often think. Rather, self-sabotage is an unconscious way our mind tries to keep us safe, even if the situation has changed. It often stems from long-held beliefs, fears, or unresolved experiences that shape how we act without us fully realizing it. Self-sabotage shows up in many subtle ways. It could be procrastination when facing important tasks, choosing comfort food despite wanting to be healthier, or avoiding opportunities because they feel intimidating. These actions feel automatic, almost like a default setting. Our brains prefer what is easy and known because it feels less threatening. Unfortunately, this means we sometimes act against our own best interests, all in an effort to avoid discomfort or perceived danger. Understanding this helps explain why growth is difficult when we rely too much on comfort. True progress requires pushing boundaries and embracing moments of discomfort. Change demands effort, uncertainty, and sometimes failure. But those who stay within their comfort zones avoid these challenges, unknowingly holding themselves back. The comfort zone becomes not a place of rest, but a cage built from fear and familiarity. When comfort turns to confinement, it drains motivation and stunts personal development. It can create a false sense of safety that delays facing important issues or pursuing meaningful goals. Over time, this leads to frustration, regret, and sometimes even a loss of identity, as people feel stuck but unable to break free from their habits. One practical step to escape this cycle is to start noticing the moments when comfort begins to limit you. This could be recognizing patterns of avoidance or routines that serve more to keep you stationary than to support your direction. Challenging yourself to take small, manageable risks gradually expands your boundaries and rewires your responses. It helps build confidence in facing uncertainty without feeling overwhelmed. Growth does not require giant leaps. It often unfolds through consistent, conscious choices to lean into discomfort just a little more each day. Why humans choose familiar pain over unfamiliar growth. Imagine someone who has been in the same job for years, feeling unfulfilled but hesitant to make a change. Every time they think about quitting, doubt and fear creep in. They tell themselves stories like, "What if I fail?" or "It's safer here." So instead of risking discomfort or uncertainty, they stay in a situation that drains them, even if it causes stress or unhappiness. This pattern repeats across many areas in life, persisting in toxic relationships, avoiding financial decisions, or sticking to bad habits. We often find ourselves trapped in routines that are painful but predictable because the unfamiliar seems scarier than the pain we already know. On the surface, choosing familiar pain seems irrational. If the pain feels unbearable, why wouldn't someone seek relief? The truth is, this choice is driven by deeply rooted fears and psychological habits, not laziness or stubbornness. Humans tend to cling to what they know because familiarity offers a false sense of control. When life is predictable, even if it's uncomfortable, there's a sense of safety. Changing things, on the other hand, introduces uncertainty, and that uncertainty can trigger anxiety, shame, or guilt. These feelings often overshadow the potential benefits of growth, making staying still seem like the safer option, even when it's costing us happiness and progress. Self-sabotage is a common way people stay stuck in familiar pain. It often happens unconsciously, almost like an instinct. When faced with the prospect of growth or change, our minds may react with fear that manifests as procrastination, doubt, or self-criticism. This isn't because we're lazy or unintelligent, but because our brains are wired to protect us from perceived threats. The familiar, even if painful, feels safer because it's known territory. The unfamiliar, representing growth, comes with risks that some parts of us aren't prepared to handle. Without realizing it, people create barriers, missed opportunities, broken promises, or destructive habits because their subconscious is trying to shield them from the discomfort of change. Choosing routine over growth also ties into how humans find comfort in consistency. Our brains crave predictability. Knowing what to expect makes life easier to navigate. Changing circumstances threaten this stability, and our minds often resist because they interpret change as a potential source of danger or chaos. For example, someone might stay in a toxic relationship because ending it might mean facing loneliness or feelings of shame. Similarly, avoiding new career paths can stem from fear of failure or losing social status. These fears aren't logical but emotional, rooted in our earliest experiences of survival and safety. Because the unknown can feel like a threat, many people convince themselves that surviving discomfort is better than risking the pain that comes with growth. An often overlooked aspect is how memories reinforce these patterns. When someone has experienced rejection, failure, or disappointment in the past, their brain creates a biased lens that magnifies those fears. These memories act like anchors, making the idea of stepping into something uncertain seem even more daunting. As a result, it's easier to stay in a painful routine than to face the possibility of embarrassment or loss. This cycle feeds itself. Every time a person avoids growth, it deepens their belief that change is too dangerous. But recognizing that these fears are often exaggerated by our own minds can be a powerful step toward breaking free. Small, consistent actions toward growth can gradually rewire these patterns, showing the brain that the unfamiliar isn't always dangerous. Understanding why humans prefer familiar pain over the discomfort of growth reveals that change isn't simply a matter of willpower. It's about confronting the psychological barriers that keep us stuck. If you want to move forward, start by noticing when your mind resists change and ask yourself what fears are at play. Often, just naming these fears makes them less intimidating. Choosing gradual steps over sudden leaps can help ease the discomfort, making growth feel more manageable. Over time, reconditioning the mind to associate change with opportunities rather than threats can create a stronger desire to pursue growth rather than cling to familiar pain. Chapter 6: Identity and Self-Sabotage. How sabotage occurs when new desires threaten current identity. Maria had always found herself stuck in the same cycle. Each time she entered a new relationship, she would panic when things began to get serious. Rather than addressing her fears, she would create drama, picking fights over trivial matters or pulling away entirely. This pattern seemed to continue in her financial life as well. Just when she began to save money, an unexpected expense would arise, often due to a spontaneous purchase she felt compelled to make. Her friends often wondered why she repeated these mistakes, and Maria herself felt frustrated and confused. She wanted stability and happiness, yet her actions pulled her in the opposite direction. Each time she thought she was moving forward, she found herself slipping back into old habits. It was as if a hidden force prevented her from reaching the life she genuinely desired. Self-sabotage occurs because of a fear of change. When Maria would start to feel secure in a relationship or her finances, a part of her, rooted in her current identity, would signal danger. This voice inside her warned that change could lead to loss, the loss of familiarity, comfort, or even identity. People often associate self-sabotage with laziness or stupidity. However, it is deeper than that. It is an unconscious reaction to protect the self from a perceived threat. When someone wrestles with adopting a new desire, that desire can be seen as a threat to who they believe they are. This mechanism isn't a reflection of intelligence or effort. Instead, it stems from a deep-seated need to remain in a familiar state, where issues are known, even if they are painful. Many individuals, like Maria, may feel trapped in a cycle of repetitive behaviors without realizing they are unknowingly resisting the changes they crave. Understanding this pattern can be vital for anyone striving to alter their lives. Individuals can work towards breaking the cycle by recognizing triggers and fears. This begins with a self-reflective process to assess what new desires evoke anxiety. It is about acknowledging those feelings and realizing they stem from the protective instincts that want to keep individuals in their comfort zones. When this connection is understood, it opens the door to making conscious choices that align with the new, desired identity rather than the old one. Taking small, manageable steps toward change can help diffuse fear, allowing for growth rather than regression. For anyone feeling stuck, acknowledging the fear as part of the journey can pave the way for lasting transformation. Behaving like who one believes they are, not who they want to be. Alex has spent years stuck in a frustrating cycle, encountering similar problems over and over again. Relationships begin with promise but inevitably fall apart, leaving Alex feeling hurt and confused about why the same patterns keep happening. Finances barely improve despite efforts to budget or save, often ending in unexpected setbacks. Habits that were meant to bring growth and stability, like regular exercise or healthier eating, repeatedly fall to the wayside, creating a sense of failure. Despite trying different strategies and seeking advice, Alex struggles to pinpoint where things truly go wrong. This repetition doesn't come from a lack of trying or a shortage of willpower. Instead, the deeper issue lies beneath the surface, masked by frustration and blame. Alex's experience shows that without understanding the roots of these recurring difficulties, breaking free from them remains almost impossible. Each failure feels like a dead end, as if trying to climb a ladder where the rungs mysteriously shift just as progress is about to be made. The problem isn't just about what Alex does, but about who Alex believes they are and how that shapes their actions. Most people interpret repeated failures as signs of laziness, lack of intelligence, or poor character. But in reality, self-sabotage comes from an entirely different place. It functions as an unconscious protective mechanism that defends a person's existing sense of self. When someone tries to change, but their inner identity doesn't match that change, a conflict arises. This conflict triggers behaviors that seem counterproductive because they actually serve to keep the individual safe within familiar boundaries. These actions might look like self-defeating habits, but beneath the surface, they protect a version of identity that feels known and secure, even if it causes pain. For Alex, this means acting in ways that confirm internal beliefs about who they truly are, rather than who they hope or wish to become. If Alex believes deep down that they are destined to fail or are not good enough for stable love or financial success, the mind creates patterns that make those beliefs come true. This is not a conscious choice, but a powerful force driven by the need to remain consistent with one's perceived identity. Changing behaviors alone rarely works, because the internal story continues to pull actions back toward what feels authentic, even when that authenticity is harmful. Understanding this link between identity and behavior shifts how setbacks are viewed. Instead of blaming oneself for poor choices or lack of effort, it becomes clearer that change requires reshaping these deep-rooted identity beliefs. When the sense of self evolves, so do the behaviors that arise naturally from it. The key lies in becoming aware of these hidden beliefs and gently altering the story we tell ourselves about who we are. Only then can actions align with true growth and lasting transformation, breaking the cycle of repetitive mistakes like those Alex keeps encountering. The psychological mechanics behind identity-based self-sabotage. Many people unconsciously act in ways that prevent them from achieving their goals, and a key reason often lies in how they see themselves. Our identities are shaped by a combination of upbringing, past experiences, beliefs, and societal influences. For example, someone who grew up hearing they're not good enough might internalize that message, leading to behaviors that reinforce that belief. These self-defeating actions aren't always deliberate. Rather, they stem from deep-seated assumptions we might not even realize we hold. These beliefs act like invisible scripts guiding behavior in ways that seem logical to us, even if they work against our best interests. These unconscious beliefs about who we are create internal conflicts. When someone sees themselves as unworthy or incapable, any success threatens to clash with this internal narrative. This can trigger feelings of anxiety, guilt, or fear, which almost always prompt self-sabotage. For instance, a person might procrastinate on an important project because they believe they don't deserve success, or they might abandon a healthy relationship because their subconscious expects disappointment. Often, these patterns show up repeatedly, creating cycles that seem hard to break but are rooted in the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Real-life stories reveal these dynamics clearly. Take someone who has always been told they're not enough. Over time, this person might unconsciously seek out situations that reinforce this belief, like setting impossible goals or sabotaging opportunities, so they don't have to face the truth of their perceived inadequacy. Alternatively, someone might repeatedly start diets or exercise routines, but give up just before they see real progress, secretly feeling they don't deserve lasting change. These behaviors appear as choices, but they originate from an inner dialogue that whispers, "You're not worthy," making self-sabotage almost an act of protecting themselves from imagined failure or rejection. The way we see ourselves acts as a filter through which we interpret opportunities and setbacks. If you believe you're someone who always fails, you're more likely to notice and remember failures, which then reinforce that negative identity. This creates a loop where the belief shapes behaviors, which then confirm the belief. Recognizing that these patterns come from your identity is crucial because it shifts the focus from just fixing behaviors to understanding and rewriting your internal story. Becoming aware of your self-perceptions is the first step toward change. Many people operate on automatic pilot, reacting to situations based on ingrained beliefs without realizing they are doing so. For example, if you consistently avoid challenging tasks because you see yourself as inherently incapable, pausing to ask, "What do I believe about myself that makes me avoid this?" can be enlightening. This kind of awareness helps peel back the layers of subconscious programming. Once you see the connection between your identity and your behaviors, you can start to intentionally challenge and reshape these beliefs. Transforming self-sabotaging patterns requires deliberate effort to shift how you think about yourself. It might involve questioning the validity of your negative beliefs or replacing them with healthier, more supportive thoughts. For example, instead of believing "I'll never be good enough," you might work on adopting a belief like "I am capable of learning and growing." This process isn't about pretending to be someone you're not, but about updating the story you tell yourself about who you are. As your perception shifts, so do your actions, making it easier to pursue your goals without sabotaging yourself in the process. One practical approach to this is to observe your internal dialogue regularly. When you catch yourself saying, "I can't do this," ask what underlying belief fuels that statement. Consider exploring whether that belief is really true or just a story you've adopted. Writing down these self-limiting beliefs and actively countering them with positive affirmations or evidence to the contrary can gradually rewire your subconscious. Over time, These new internal narratives help you act in alignment with a healthier sense of self, reducing the tendency to sabotage your progress unknowingly. Chapter 7. Emotional Procrastination, Delaying Life. Not just delaying tasks, but delaying meaningful life experiences. Maria was always the type of person who seemed stuck in a loop. She repeatedly found herself in relationships that left her feeling unfulfilled and rejected. When it came to money, she made impulsive purchases that drained her savings, and her habits, whether an unhealthy diet or inconsistent exercise, never seemed to improve. Friends often wondered why she couldn't break free from this cycle, but Maria struggled to see her part in it. Each time she took a step forward, it felt like 2 steps back, and before long, she'd be back in familiar territory, thinking, "Here I go again." This pattern left her frustrated and confused. Why did she keep making the same choices that led to the same disappointing outcomes? Faced with this recurring pattern, Maria's story mirrors that of many others who find themselves in a loop of self-sabotage. The truth is, self-sabotage is not merely a trait of laziness or stupidity. It often stems from deep-seated fears and limiting beliefs. People like Maria might not recognize that their actions come from a place of fear of failure, fear of success, or even fear of genuine connection. These fears lead to an internal struggle that manifests as avoiding risks or shying away from opportunities that could enhance their lives. For someone entrenched in such patterns, every opportunity can feel like a challenge that might expose their insecurities. Consequently, they delay truly important experiences while obsessing over mundane tasks. They might think that completing certain tasks will somehow bring clarity or satisfaction, yet the underlying emotional hurdles remain unaddressed. Understanding this dynamic is crucial. It provides a pathway to awareness. By establishing the connection between emotions and actions, individuals can begin to dismantle the invisible barriers holding them back. It's essential to recognize these patterns not as flaws, but as signals asking for attention. Seeking help, be it from friends, professionals, or resources, can promote healing and encourage healthier habits. Fostering an environment where personal fears are acknowledged and confronted opens the door to authentic growth and exploration of life experiences. Making gradual changes and taking small steps can drastically improve the quality of life, turning delays into meaningful discoveries. Examples: keeping busy with trivial tasks to avoid deeper issues. Sarah had been through several relationships over the years, each ending with strikingly similar heartbreak. She found herself drawn to partners who were emotionally unavailable or unreliable, even though she yearned for stability and trust. After each breakup, she wondered why she couldn't seem to change the cycle. The same pattern played out in her finances: impulsive spending followed by months of financial stress and worry. Her habits repeated as well. She promised herself she would exercise more or eat healthier, yet old habits always took over soon enough. Despite her efforts, Sarah felt trapped in these loops, unable to understand why she remained stuck in the same places, no matter how hard she tried to do things differently. What puzzled Sarah most was not the mistakes themselves, but the confusion over why she kept falling back into them. She couldn't see the deeper reasons behind her actions and viewed her behavior as a series of personal failures. This confusion drove her to stay busy, filling her days with small, trivial tasks, reorganizing her closet, cleaning spaces she didn't usually touch, or scrolling endlessly through her phone. These actions gave her a sense of accomplishment, but they didn't address the issues underneath. In fact, these distractions often prevented Sarah from facing the real problems she feared confronting: her feelings of inadequacy, fear of rejection, and self-doubt. Without realizing it, she was using busyness as a shield against the discomfort of reflection and change. What looks like laziness or poor decision-making is often a protective strategy baked deep in how the mind works. Self-sabotage is rarely about wanting to fail or making careless choices on purpose. Instead, it usually stems from unconscious fears or beliefs that hold us back. These fears might include feelings of unworthiness or the belief that we don't deserve success or happiness. Because facing these truths can feel overwhelming or painful, the mind looks for ways to avoid them. This avoidance comes out in behaviors that seem harmless on the surface but actually keep us from growing. For example, staying busy with small, meaningless tasks can provide a soothing distraction while leaving deeper issues untouched. Distraction becomes a method of coping. When someone like Sarah focuses on trivial actions, she avoids the mental and emotional work necessary to break old patterns. This kind of busyness can create the illusion of progress, but it often maintains the status quo by keeping the core fears buried. It's not about a lack of willpower, but about an instinctive reaction to discomfort. Avoidance might look like procrastinating important work, focusing obsessively on minor details, or diverting attention to social media and news. Even constant problem-solving without addressing the emotional roots falls under this umbrella. Each of these behaviors serves as a way to sidestep the deeper issues that need understanding and healing. Recognizing these patterns as protective rather than punitive is a key step toward change. Rather than judging oneself for distractions or mistakes, showing curiosity about the fears beneath these actions opens the door to growth. This awareness helps shift the focus from external busyness to internal exploration, where lasting change is possible. It's a process that invites patience, honesty, and gentle self-reflection, rather than quick fixes or harsh self-criticism. Practical tip: start by noticing when you're busy with tasks that don't move your goals forward. Pause and ask yourself what feelings you might be avoiding. This simple pause can build awareness and help you gradually turn toward the deeper work instead of running away from it. Humorous but profound insights on emotional avoidance. Imagine a person named Mark who swears he's learned his lesson every time he hits a rough patch. Yet, somehow, the minute things start feeling uncomfortable, he finds himself slipping back into old patterns. His relationships seem to follow the same script. He meets someone wonderful, then pushes them away just when things get serious. His finances? They look great for a while, but when stress hits, he racks up debt or neglects savings, convinced he'll fix things tomorrow. Habits? He vows to exercise, eat well, and stay consistent, only to hoodwink himself into a snowball of excuses. It's as if some invisible force keeps pulling him back into familiar messes, no matter how much he promises to do better. This recurring cycle isn't laziness or stupidity. It's a strange little dance of avoidance that keeps him stuck, yet strangely comfortable in the chaos he's created. And the real kicker? The more he tries to fix things on the surface, the more tangled the roots of his problems become, until he's swimming in a sea of familiar frustrations that deny him peace. Self-sabotage often gets a bad rap as foolishness or laziness, but really, it's like an awkward guard dog that's just trying to protect you without realizing it's biting your own ankles. Deep down, many people have a voice whispering that they might not be ready to handle success or happiness, so they unconsciously create obstacles. Sometimes, staying in misery feels safer than risking change and the unknown. It's easier to dance in a familiar muck than to leap into the vast, uncertain sky. This might sound funny, but there's real depth here. Self-sabotage isn't about being stupid. It's about a mind trying to keep itself safe from feelings it can't handle. For example, a person might break up with someone they care about because the thought of intimacy feels overwhelming, or they might find a million reasons why they can't succeed, even when they're capable. It's like the universe's way of holding a mirror up that says, you're more comfortable avoiding growth than facing what you fear. Recognizing this is a game changer because it reveals that those sabotaging behaviors aren't random acts of stupidity. They're signals from your subconscious trying to keep you alive, albeit on autopilot. Humor can be a useful tool here. When you realize your tendency to push people away or sabotage goals is like nature's way of keeping your inner chaos simmering, it's easier to laugh at the absurdity. This humor isn't about mockery. It's about seeing the pattern and understanding its desperate attempt at self-preservation. Once you notice the pattern, a practical step is to gently question what safety or comfort this behavior provides, because usually, it's something you're afraid to admit you need. Recognizing self-sabotage as a form of emotional avoidance transforms it from a flaw into a signal that something deeper needs addressing. Instead of castigating yourself for being stupid or lazy, you realize it's a complicated game your mind plays to keep you from feeling overwhelmed, vulnerable, or exposed. The funny part? That same game can be unraveled once you stop taking it so seriously and start observing your patterns with a curious, non-judgmental eye. Because often, the greatest step forward is simply noticing what you're doing and offering yourself a little kindness in the process. Chapter 8. The Unsafe Feel of Ease. Story of someone feeling normal only in chaos. Maria was in a constant whirlpool of chaos, often stumbling over the same mistakes that seemed to crop up in her life regularly. No matter how hard she tried to change, she found herself in similar situations where her decisions led nowhere good. She could see the pattern, but it was as if she was held captive by her routine, trapped in an endless cycle of self-sabotage. From impulsively quitting jobs to jumping into relationships that never lasted, Maria felt like she was on a treadmill, running but never making progress. Each time she thought she had finally learned a lesson, life threw something new her way. It was almost comical how often she seemed to forget the teachings of her past. Friends often pointed out her choices, but Maria brushed them off, convincing herself it was merely a phase she would outgrow. Desperation for change mingled with a comfort in the chaos. Maria felt more alive when the world around her was in disarray. This familiarity became her crutch. In moments of calm, she would feel an unsettling itch, a nagging sense that something was off. It was as if only in chaos could she find a sense of purpose or direction, leaving her at odds with the quiet times in her life. Over time, Maria learned to navigate the instability as if it were a well-worn map. Stressful moments turned into a routine she recognized, making her feel normal even in turmoil. Friends noticed her unique way of dealing with life's unpredictability. She laughed through crises as if they were just another day at the office. The signs of chaos, unexpected bills, last-minute changes, and relationship drama became her comfort zone. This chaotic life seemed to validate her sense of reality, forming a lens through which she viewed everything. The storms of life created a backdrop for her existence, shaping her sense of identity. She began developing a blurred line between chaos and normalcy, where stability felt foreign and cold. Though her friends thrived in tranquility, Maria often felt their calmness as disorienting, as if someone had suddenly changed the frequency of the radio she was tuned to. In trying to find stability, she mimicked the behavior of those around her, the friends with serene lives and organized routines, yet it felt like wearing an ill-fitting suit that swallowed her whole. Whenever she tried to adopt their lifestyle, a wave of discomfort washed over her, and she quickly reverted to her chaotic rhythm. This struggle raised questions about her understanding of normalcy while offering a bittersweet comfort in her familiar state of disarray. Maria's journey illustrates how comfort often breeds in the chaos, and recognizing this cycle is the first step for anyone feeling adrift. Setting small goals to redirect energy can ease the pull of chaos, but most importantly, accepting the need for change is crucial. Finding worth in calm moments, even if they feel temporary, is a step toward real normality. Conditioned nervous systems that reject peace and calm. Jane is someone who keeps finding herself caught in the same patterns year after year. She struggles with relationships that start with hope but end in disappointment. Financial stress follows a similar path, with promising opportunities slipping through her fingers or decisions that lead to setbacks she didn't expect. Looking closer, it becomes clear these aren't random events but part of a repeating cycle. Deep inside, unconscious patterns shape her choices. They push her toward behaviors that undermine her own well-being, even when she wants things to improve. The problem is that Jane isn't fully aware of these hidden influences. When she faces challenges, her nervous system reacts automatically, guiding her toward familiar responses, even if those responses create more trouble. For example, she might pull away when a partner starts to get close, or take financial risks impulsively when she feels anxious. These instinctive reactions give temporary relief from uncomfortable feelings, but leave her stuck in a loop of frustration and loss. The nervous system is designed to keep us safe by responding quickly to threats. But in some people, including Jane, it becomes conditioned to expect danger even when the environment is safe. This conditioning can come from early life experiences, trauma, or prolonged stress. Over time, the nervous system stays in a heightened state of alertness. Instead of relaxing into calm and safety, it remains ready to react at any moment, scanning for potential danger. This means that feelings of ease or peace can actually feel uncomfortable or unsafe to someone like Jane. Her body and mind are so used to tension and vigilance that calmness might trigger a sense of vulnerability. Because the nervous system doesn't trust safety, moments of relaxation become moments of anxiety. This creates a strange paradox. Peace is something to resist, and calm becomes a source of unease. As a result, Jane unconsciously sabotages situations where peace is possible, pulling away or creating conflict to restore the familiar sense of stress and alertness. Understanding this response helps explain why changing these patterns is so difficult. It's not just about making better decisions consciously. It's about retraining a nervous system that has been conditioned to reject calm. This rewiring requires patience and practices that help the body and mind feel genuinely safe enough to relax. Only when the nervous system can settle into peace without fear does the cycle of self-sabotage begin to break, opening the door for healthier relationships and more stable financial choices. One practical step toward shifting this conditioned response involves learning to recognize the body's signals in moments of calm. Notice any subtle tension, discomfort, or urge to escape or react. Bringing awareness to these sensations without judgment creates space for the nervous system to gradually become comfortable with ease. Over time, this process weakens the old patterns that push Jane and others like her away from peace, allowing a new way of living anchored in genuine safety and calm. Understanding why ease can feel unsafe or unfamiliar. Imagine someone who always finds themselves repeating the same mistakes. Maybe they stay in unhealthy relationships, sabotage their career progress, or avoid taking steps toward their goals. Despite knowing what they want, they keep stumbling into familiar patterns. It's like an invisible loop that pulls them back into comfort zones that no longer serve them. Often, they don't see the cycle at first because it happens quietly, behind the scenes, rooted in unconscious habits. This recurring pattern creates a sense of frustration, yet they might not realize it's happening because it feels so normal to them. Understanding why this pattern exists begins with recognizing that it isn't about a lack of effort or intelligence. Often, people subconsciously create these cycles to protect themselves from perceived threats. At the core, these behaviors are linked to past experiences and fears that have been trained into the brain over time. For instance, someone who was abandoned in childhood might unconsciously choose relationships that mimic that experience, even when they consciously wish for stability. These actions become a form of self-protection, even if they result in suffering or disappointment. It's not that they are resistant to change, but that their mind has learned a way to stay safe, even if that safety is no longer helpful. People tend to associate unfamiliarity with danger because, historically, unknown circumstances meant potential threats. When things feel too new or different, the body can respond with fear, discomfort, or suspicion. This reaction is a survival instinct carried over from primitive times. As adults, we might feel uneasy when faced with change, not because it's inherently bad, but because our nervous system gets triggered. Ease, which generally feels relaxing and comfortable, can seem risky because it lacks the defenses we've built up to shield ourselves from perceived harm. For many, it's easier to stick with what they know, regardless of whether it's good or bad, rather than face the uncertainty that comes with genuine ease. It's helpful to understand that ease can seem unfamiliar for a couple of reasons. First, the brain has been conditioned over years to associate safety with struggle or effort. When life feels smooth, the brain sometimes interprets that as something wrong or that something's missing. Second, people often equate familiar with secure. If someone has repeatedly faced hardship or conflict, their mind can mistakenly believe that safety lies in chaos or difficulty. As a result, when things begin to settle or become effortless, it can trigger suspicion or resistance. The body and mind have learned to avoid stillness, because in their view, that's when danger might appear. Recognizing these patterns is an important step to changing how we experience ease. Instead of judging the unfamiliar as dangerous, it helps to see it as a natural part of growth. You can practice welcoming moments of calm or simplicity as signs that you're moving in the right direction. Notice how your body responds to ease, perhaps with tension or suspicion, and gently remind yourself that safety can be found in stillness, not just in chaos. Learning to reframe the idea of ease as something trustworthy rather than threatening allows you to open the door to a more peaceful and fulfilling experience of life. Small steps, such as taking a few deep breaths when feeling uneasy, can help your nervous system gradually adjust to comfort and trust that it's safe to relax. Chapter 9: Neuroscience of Sabotage. Simplified explanation of dopamine, cortisol, and brain chemistry. Many people find themselves in a cycle of facing the same difficulties over and over again. Take Jane, for instance. She is a talented graphic designer, yet she struggles to ask for a raise or promotion. Each time she considers it, a wave of anxiety washes over her. This anxiety stops her from taking action, leaving her financially stagnant while her peers advance. Her friends often encourage her to be more assertive, but Jane feels stuck, unable to break free from her self-imposed limitations. In her personal life, she repeatedly chooses partners who don't treat her well, convincing herself that love shouldn't be too demanding. These patterns create resentment in her relationships, leading to pain and frustration. Jane's choices are not based on a lack of intelligence or desire. Rather, they highlight deeper, unconscious mechanisms at play within her brain. Jane's story is a common one, reflecting how many navigate challenges related to self-worth, finances, and relationships. These repetitive issues often stem from deep-rooted beliefs and emotional responses shaped by past experiences. People like Jane often experience feelings of insecurity or fear of failure that trigger their unconscious mind to self-sabotage. This self-sabotage doesn't stem from being lazy or foolish. Rather, it ties back to how brain chemicals like dopamine and cortisol shape their thoughts and behaviors. Dopamine is the brain's feel-good chemical. It plays a crucial role in the reward system, influencing motivation and pleasure. When you achieve something, or even think about achieving it, your brain releases dopamine, creating feelings of joy and fulfillment. This mechanism encourages you to pursue rewarding activities. Think of how it feels when completing a work project or receiving compliments on your appearance. The rush you feel is dopamine at work, reinforcing positive behavior and setting the stage for future successes. On the flip side, cortisol, often referred to as the stress hormone, is released in response to stress. While cortisol is essential for managing short-term stress, chronic high levels can lead to various negative outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and a feeling of being overwhelmed. In Jane's case, her frustration and worry about her career and relationships spike her cortisol levels, which may lead her deeper into a cycle of self-doubt and inaction. The effect of cortisol can create a barrier to motivation, making it difficult to feel excited about future possibilities. This interplay between dopamine and cortisol is essential for understanding behaviors like Jane's. When she feels anxious, her cortisol spikes, dampening her capacity to seek those rewarding experiences and reducing the dopamine response she might otherwise receive from taking action. The anxiety stemming from cortisol can create a loop. Fear leads to avoidance, which reinforces her lack of positive experiences, further diminishing her dopamine levels. Over time, this can turn into a habit that feels impossible to break. Understanding these dynamics sheds light on the complexities of human behavior and self-sabotage. It isn't that people are inherently flawed. Instead, their brains are reacting to their environment in ways that can lead to unproductive patterns. Awareness of how dopamine and cortisol influence thoughts and emotions can help individuals recognize when they may be stuck in these patterns, allowing for more conscious decision-making. To break free from the cycle of self-sabotage, it can be beneficial to create small successes that trigger positive feelings. This can involve setting realistic goals that are achievable, which can spark dopamine release and start to counteract the stress from cortisol. For instance, if Jane were to practice asking for feedback in smaller, low-stakes situations, she might gradually build her confidence. Such steps create momentum, helping her shift from inaction to a more empowered state. The goal is to slowly build a new pattern that reinforces positive behavior, enabling a healthier cycle of motivation and achievement. How comfort-seeking and pattern repetition reinforce sabotage behaviors. Imagine a person named Sarah who finds herself stuck in a frustrating cycle. She begins new relationships full of hope, only to see them end in disappointment again and again. Her finances follow a similar path. She saves money with determination, but unexpected expenses or impulse purchases always drain her accounts quickly. Even her daily habits reflect this pattern. She commits to healthy routines, like waking up early or exercising regularly, but soon drifts back to old, familiar comforts that offer temporary relief. Sarah doesn't understand why she keeps ending up in the same places, feeling stuck and discouraged. She feels as if she's sabotaging her own progress, but deep down, she wonders whether it's really her fault or if something else is at play. What Sarah experiences isn't unique. Many people struggle to break free from repeating unhelpful behaviors that harm their growth. This confusion often grows because the setbacks don't seem to come from a lack of effort or intelligence. Instead, they come from hidden patterns that pull a person back to familiar, comfortable states, even when that comfort shows up as pain or failure. This creates a paradox where seeking relief feels good in the moment but leads to repeated struggles down the line. Sarah's story reflects a deeper truth. The roadblocks we face are often shaped by entrenched cycles that feel both natural and confusing at the same time. Self-sabotage is often misunderstood. It's easy to mistake these behaviors for laziness, lack of willpower, or poor decision-making. The reality is more complex. Self-sabotage often functions as a protective mechanism rooted in the brain's deep need to seek comfort and avoid pain. When the mind encounters situations that feel threatening or uncertain, even if they're necessary for growth, it may trigger familiar patterns that offer a sense of security. These patterns are formed by past experiences and emotional habits, and they keep repeating because the brain interprets them as safer than stepping into the unknown. This means that behaviors which seem harmful or irrational on the surface are actually attempts to maintain emotional equilibrium. Comfort seeking drives people to choose what feels familiar over what promises success but carries risk. For example, procrastinating on a challenging project may feel like failure, but it also protects a person from the stress of potential criticism or disappointment. This protection operates below the level of conscious thought, so people may not be aware they're sabotaging themselves. It's not about stupidity or unwillingness to change. It's about the mind's tendency to prioritize short-term emotional safety over long-term benefits. Patterns repeat because the brain builds strong neural pathways around these comfort-seeking habits. Each time a person returns to a familiar habit, the connection strengthens, making it harder to break free. Change requires creating new pathways, which takes effort and can feel uncomfortable. This explains why even well-intentioned attempts to improve can falter when old patterns pull a person back. Understanding self-sabotage as an unconscious effort to stay comfortable helps reframe these behaviors, not as failures, but as messages that the mind needs new ways to feel safe while moving forward. Recognizing these dynamics can encourage a more compassionate approach to personal growth. Instead of blaming oneself, it becomes possible to identify the underlying emotional needs driving sabotage. From there, individuals can start experimenting with new habits that offer comfort in healthier ways, gradually reshaping those ingrained patterns. One practical way to begin shifting these cycles is to pay close attention to the moments when comfort-seeking kicks in. Notice the feelings and thoughts that accompany the urge to return to old habits. This awareness creates space to choose differently, building new patterns in place of the old ones. Though it's unlikely to be immediate or easy, this mindful approach opens the door to meaningful change over time without triggering the brain's protective alarms. Making neuroscience accessible and relevant to human experience. Many people see their lives as a series of random events, but often, patterns of self-sabotage keep repeating without them realizing it. For example, someone might work hard to land a new job, but then, just as the opportunity arises, they find themselves canceling interviews or missing deadlines. Similarly, a person trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle might start strong, but then suddenly revert to old habits like overeating or neglecting workouts, despite their good intentions. These repeated mistakes are not just bad luck. They stem from unconscious choices made by parts of the brain that override conscious efforts. In relationships, someone might push away intimacy or sabotage connections by snapping at loved ones or withdrawing emotionally, even when they desire closeness. These examples show how patterns of behavior repeat across different areas, often without awareness, making it feel like life is out of control. Often, these actions seem automatic, happening before we even realize we are doing them. It's as if a hidden part of us has a mind of its own, sticking to familiar ways of coping, whether it's avoiding success, self-doubt, or fear of change. These familiar cycles can be frustrating because they block progress and cause feelings of guilt or disappointment. Understanding that these behaviors are driven by unconscious processes can open the door to change. Recognizing the recurring nature of such mistakes allows us to see that they are not entirely about lack of willpower, but about deeper neurological patterns that influence decision-making. Realizing this can help transform shame into curiosity and motivate us to consciously intervene in these automatic patterns, breaking the cycle of self-sabotage. When these repetitive mistakes occur across areas like work, health, or personal relationships, it reflects how the mind tends to follow established routes. Our brains develop habits that can be both helpful and obstructive. Some habits protect us from fear or discomfort, but they can also reinforce patterns of self-defeat. For example, a person might unconsciously avoid applying for promotions because they fear failure, even though they genuinely want career growth. Or someone might push away friendship opportunities because it feels safer to stay isolated. These actions, rooted in past experiences and emotional memories, are often automatic and difficult to control consciously. Seeing these patterns clearly helps us understand that changing them requires more than just willpower. It involves rewiring parts of our brain that have learned these behaviors over time. The brain has many parts working together to influence our behavior, but one key player in self-sabotage is the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for processing emotions, especially fear, and can trigger defensive responses even when there's no immediate danger. When a behavior or situation reminds us of past failure or rejection, the amygdala signals a threat, activating a flight or fight response. This response often causes us to avoid or retreat from opportunities, even if these actions are harmful in the long run. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain involved in decision-making and planning, can be overwhelmed or bypassed, making it harder to choose rational actions over emotional reactions. This imbalance between emotional centers and rational thought accounts for how we often act against our own goals, without realizing it. Furthermore, the brain learns habits through repeated experiences, wiring certain pathways that become automatic. When we repeatedly respond with self-doubt or avoidance, neural circuits strengthen, making those reactions our default mode. Changing these patterns means retraining the brain, which is possible because the brain remains adaptable well into adulthood. Techniques like mindfulness help in gaining awareness of emotional reactions before they trigger automatic responses, allowing the prefrontal cortex to step in. Understanding that self-sabotage originates from these neurological processes makes it clear that change is not about sheer willpower, but about rewiring and reshaping these pathways. This knowledge transforms the way we see our behaviors, showing that even deeply ingrained patterns can be altered with awareness and practice. Any behavior that seems automatic or overpowered by emotion is a sign that certain neural connections have become strong. Recognizing that these reactions are rooted in brain function helps demystify why we sometimes act against our own interests. It also encourages patience and persistence in making changes since neural pathways can be reshaped over time. Importantly, our brains are plastic, meaning they can form new connections with conscious effort. Simple practices like noting emotional triggers, pausing before acting, or practicing calming techniques can help weaken old patterns and build healthier responses. Knowing how the brain works in these situations can empower anyone to take practical steps toward more intentional, self-aware decision-making, breaking the cycle of unconscious self-sabotage. One practical tip is to pay close attention to moments when you feel yourself slipping into old habits. Instead of reacting automatically, pause and ask yourself what your brain is trying to protect you from. Often, underlying fears or past hurts are at play, and recognizing these can lessen their grip. Over time, with consistent effort, retraining these neural pathways becomes more natural, leading to healthier choices and a greater sense of control over your actions. Because the brain remains adaptable, even long-standing patterns can be reshaped, opening the way to a more conscious and satisfying life. Chapter 10: Sabotaging Relationships. Pulling away, overthinking, testing partners, fearing abandonment. Emma had always seemed to find herself in the same predicament in her relationships. Time and again, she would meet someone who genuinely cared for her, only to have her emotions pull her in the opposite direction. Initially, there was excitement and laughter, but as things began to deepen, she felt an overwhelming urge to withdraw. This pattern played out like clockwork. Just when everything appeared to be perfect, she would zone out, avoiding phone calls and social engagements, leaving her partners confused and hurt. It wasn't that Emma didn't want love. Rather, she had developed an instinct to retreat when vulnerability loomed too large. She had experienced abandonment in her past, making her hyper-aware of the possibility of being hurt again. This fear triggered a self-protective mechanism that often felt like self-sabotage. Friends would watch her break off relationships that had potential, urging her to reconsider, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that staying close would ultimately lead to pain. Self-sabotage is often misidentified as mere laziness or a lack of intelligence. In reality, it bubbles up from deeper issues that many may not fully realize. Unresolved fears or past experiences can manifest themselves in ways that lead to destructive behaviors. When something starts to feel real, the body can react in surprising and often counterproductive ways. In Emma's case, her history taught her that love could lead to loss, so her mind instinctively convinced her to pull back rather than face possible heartbreak. This behavior is common. Many people instinctively withdraw when emotions run deep. For some, it means ghosting a partner when the relationship becomes too intimate. For others, it could mean overthinking every message or look from a significant other, convincing oneself that a minor issue is a potential reason for future abandonment. Recognizing these patterns is the first step in changing them. Fear of abandonment can loom large, often affecting relationships in subtle yet profound ways. Individuals may create scenarios in their minds that justify their disconnect. For example, Emma often imagined her partner's losing interest, which only fueled her need to pull away first. To her, it felt safer to create distance than to risk experiencing rejection. This mental game can cause misunderstandings and missed opportunities. If she never lets someone get too close, they can't leave her heartbroken, or so she thought. These fears often lead to testing partners, where one inevitably gauges how much love and patience the other is willing to extend before they decide they've had enough. This testing can appear as passive-aggressive behavior or sudden coldness, as if to gauge the partner's commitment. Yet, it's usually driven by insecurity and the quest for reassurance, which can spiral into a vicious cycle of doubt and isolation. Breaking the cycle of pulling away, overthinking, and testing requires conscious effort and self-exploration. Recognizing that these patterns stem not from personal flaws, but rather from past experiences, is crucial. Reflecting on early relationship dynamics can often uncover why these fears are so pervasive. For Emma, learning about attachment styles helped her understand that her behaviors were not uncommon and that many people share similar struggles. Finding healthy ways to cope with anxiety can be liberating. Journaling can serve as a powerful tool to process feelings and track patterns. Engaging in open communication with partners about fears and insecurities creates a space for understanding. This can also lead to validating experiences and building intimacy rather than pushing partners away. Cultivating resilience against the fear of abandonment opens the doors to healthier relationships full of genuine connection. As you navigate your own relationship journeys, recognize that self-sabotage may not be inherent laziness or a personal flaw. It often arises from complex emotions tied to past experiences. Talk about your fears with trusted friends or a mental health professional. Developing a toolkit of coping strategies for moments when the urge to pull away strikes can help you reconnect with those around you instead of retreating. Emotional honesty and the reality of relationship sabotage. Alex has always found himself stuck in a cycle when it comes to relationships. Time and again, he enters into partnerships with high hopes, only to face similar problems that eventually lead to the same painful outcomes. Despite his best intentions and efforts, Alex struggles to figure out why history seems to repeat itself. Each breakup leaves him confused, frustrated, and questioning what went wrong. Yet the deeper reasons beneath these recurring challenges remain hidden from his view. Without understanding the driving forces behind his behavior and emotional responses, Alex finds it impossible to break free from the pattern and build the kind of connections he truly desires. What makes Alex's story common is that countless people experience this without realizing there are invisible forces at work beneath the surface. He might blame the other person, outside circumstances, or even himself, but rarely does he connect the dots to recognize how his own fears, expectations, and defense mechanisms shape the course of his relationships. This lack of awareness blinds him to recurring signals and patterns that could point to larger emotional truths he needs to face. It's not just about the actions that unfold between partners, but about what happens inside Alex's own mind and heart that constantly undermines the possibility of lasting connection. By looking closely at Alex's experience, we start to see that repeated romantic troubles often stem from deeper emotional conflicts and unresolved wounds. These hidden layers pull the strings behind behavior and decisions, shaping how relationships evolve in ways that feel both confusing and inescapable. This makes Alex's struggle especially painful because it's not simply a matter of luck or compatibility. It's a form of self-sabotage that plays out without conscious control or understanding. Self-sabotage in relationships doesn't come from a place of laziness or a lack of intelligence. Rather, it is an unconscious defense mechanism designed to protect a person from emotional pain that feels too overwhelming to handle. When underlying fears and insecurities aren't acknowledged or addressed, the mind often creates invisible barriers to keep vulnerability at bay. These barriers may show up as avoidance, mistrust, picking fights, pushing a partner away, or even choosing unavailable or unhealthy partners. Though these actions appear counterproductive on the surface, they serve the hidden purpose of shielding fragile parts of the self from potential harm. This emotional dishonesty with oneself creates a dangerous loop where the true needs and feelings are ignored or denied. When people like Alex fail to express or even recognize their authentic emotions, they end up acting out through behaviors that chip away at connection. This form of sabotage isn't done intentionally, but it damages relationships just the same, often leaving both partners hurt and confused. Over time, self-sabotage implants fear and mistrust in the relationship's foundation, making genuine closeness seem too risky or impossible. The impact of this pattern on relationships can be heavy. It generates anxiety and distance instead of intimacy, feeding doubts and resentments. Even when a partner tries to reach out or fix problems, the emotional walls remain firmly in place. The person caught in self-sabotage may also struggle to communicate clearly or honestly because they are scared to confront what lies beneath their own reactions. This cycle often leads to breakups or dissatisfaction, not because the people involved aren't capable of love, but because they are battling unseen emotional barriers that interfere with trust and openness. Recognizing self-sabotage as a natural, though harmful, response to emotional pain opens the door to change. It invites a compassionate approach towards oneself, understanding that these behaviors are signals pointing to unmet needs or fears. Once these internal struggles become visible and acknowledged, it becomes possible to address them directly through honesty, emotional exploration, and healthier ways of connecting. This shift can gradually dismantle the destructive patterns and create healthier, more supportive relationships. One practical step is to start identifying the moments when self-sabotage occurs, when a protective mechanism kicks in and creates distance or conflict. Naming these moments without judgment can help clarify what emotional pain or fear lies beneath. Another useful approach is learning to express feelings in safe spaces, whether through therapy, trusted friends, or personal reflection. Building emotional honesty doesn't happen overnight, but each attempt to face discomfort with openness chips away at the barriers and moves toward allowing true intimacy to grow. Understanding the deep roots of relationship self-sabotage. Imagine someone who constantly finds themselves in relationships that seem promising but eventually fall apart. No matter how much effort they put in or how much they want things to work, they often end up repeating the same mistakes. They might push their partners away, undermine their own happiness, or set unrealistic expectations that lead to disappointment. This pattern can feel frustrating and confusing, as it seems like they are their own worst enemy. Behind these recurring issues often lies a pattern of self-sabotage, a behavior rooted in deeper emotional and psychological factors that go beyond surface-level problems. Many people are unaware that their tendency to sabotage relationships is tied to fears and beliefs stored deep within their subconscious mind. These fears may include a fear of abandonment, rejection, or being hurt again. They might also have underlying beliefs that they are unworthy of love, or that happiness is fleeting and not meant for them. These beliefs often originate from early experiences, such as childhood relationships with caregivers, past trauma, or repeated exposure to rejection and disappointment. Because these fears are usually unconscious, individuals may not realize that they are the cause of their own struggles. For instance, someone might unconsciously fear intimacy because it feels safer to keep people at a distance. They might shy away from emotional closeness or sabotage a relationship when things start to get serious, simply because their mind interprets intimacy as a threat. Others may cling tightly to relationships out of fear of loneliness, but then undermine those same connections through jealousy or controlling behavior. These actions, though seemingly destructive, serve a purpose. They temporarily protect the individual from deeper pain or feelings of unworthiness. Recognizing that these patterns stem from deep-seated fears can be the first step toward breaking free from self-sabotage. It's also common for self-sabotaging behaviors to be driven by negative self-beliefs that have been reinforced over time. Someone might believe they are not lovable, or that relationships always end badly for them. These beliefs become like internal scripts that shape their choices and reactions. When faced with potential vulnerability, these beliefs often trigger automatic responses such as withdrawing, fighting, or creating chaos. Because these reactions happen on an unconscious level, they can seem automatic and unavoidable, making change feel impossible. Understanding the roots of self-sabotage involves recognizing how these fears and beliefs are formed. Often, they originate from experiences where the individual felt unsafe, unworthy, or misunderstood. Childhood experiences, such as neglect or emotional abandonment, can leave a deep imprint that influences how someone approaches love and connection as an adult. Past heartbreaks or betrayals can reinforce the idea that love is unstable or dangerous. These early lessons shape not only what someone expects from relationships, but also how they act within them, sometimes undermining their chance at genuine happiness. It's worth noting that these underlying fears and beliefs are often automatic responses designed to protect us from perceived threats, even if they cause harm in the long run. For example, avoiding intimacy protects someone from potential rejection, but it also prevents meaningful connection. Recognizing that these behaviors are rooted in protective mechanisms rather than willful self-destruction can help a person approach change with more compassion. Instead of blaming oneself for past mistakes, understanding the origin of these patterns allows for more targeted healing and realignment with healthier beliefs about love and worthiness. A practical tip is to pay close attention to the moment when self-sabotaging behaviors or thoughts arise. Notice what feelings or thoughts are triggered, and ask yourself whether they are based on past fears rather than current realities. Sometimes writing down these experiences can reveal recurring themes or beliefs that lie beneath the actions. Challenging and reframing these beliefs gradually can lead to healthier patterns, as they no longer operate unconsciously, but become conscious tools for growth and better decision-making. Chapter 11. Ego Defense Systems. Why change feels like death to the ego. Imagine a young woman named Sarah who seems to have the same issues time and again. She jumps from one relationship to another, only to end up feeling hurt and disappointed. Each time, she tells herself she will change to avoid getting entangled with the same type of person. Yet, when a new relationship begins, it's as if she's under a spell, overlooking the red flags that flash in front of her. Despite her good intentions, she finds herself on the same roller coaster ride, feeling trapped. This pattern plays out not just in her love life, but also in her professional aspirations. Whenever she applies for a new job, self-doubt creeps in, and she convinces herself that she's not qualified enough. Sarah may not fully understand why she keeps repeating these behaviors, but deep down, they stem from a subconscious fear of change. The concept of self-sabotage can be difficult to understand. For many, the idea that they block their own progress feels counterintuitive. However, this behavior is often rooted in the ego's instinct to protect itself. The ego fears changes because it perceives them as threats to its identity and safety. When faced with the possibility of growth or change, the ego may resort to old, familiar patterns that bring about discomfort but ultimately feel secure. This protective mechanism ensures that the individual stays within the boundaries of what they know, even if that means suffering through mistakes. Sarah's actions illustrate this beautifully. Each time she enters a new relationship, her ego remembers the safety of past patterns, even if they were harmful. It clings to familiarity as if it's a life raft in turbulent waters. Emotions like fear, anxiety, and shame are also powerful players in this struggle. When Sarah thinks about making a significant change in her life, feelings of inadequacy wash over her. This emotional response reinforces her ego's stance. The thought of transformation becomes synonymous with a feared loss, the loss of her previous identity, security, or a sense of belonging. As Sarah navigates these shifts, she learns that change often feels like a death to the ego, a shedding of an old skin that is uncomfortable and frightening. For anyone struggling with these feelings, it's essential to recognize the patterns that drive behavior. This awareness can pave the way to making choices that not only protect you, but also encourage growth. Embracing change requires understanding that you are not alone in this journey and that fear is a natural part of any transformation. Learning to sit with discomfort instead of fleeing from it can make a significant difference. Take small steps, set achievable goals that allow you to build resilience over time, and remember that true growth often resides outside your comfort zone. Metaphors: updating an operating system, shedding old skins. Imagine someone named Alex who keeps finding themselves stuck in the same type of problems, no matter how hard they try to change. In relationships, Alex chooses partners who are emotionally distant. With money, Alex repeatedly spends impulsively, only to struggle later with bills. When it comes to habits, they promise themselves they will quit procrastinating, but it never sticks. After every setback, there's frustration and confusion about why things don't improve despite all the effort. What Alex doesn't realize is that beneath these surface issues lies a deeper, invisible pattern that pulls them back into the same difficulties again and again. These repeated struggles aren't random or simply bad luck. They are driven by subconscious programming, automatic reactions, and beliefs formed early in life, acting like an internal system running in the background. This system processes information and triggers behaviors meant to protect Alex from perceived dangers or reduce discomfort, even if those behaviors end up causing harm in the long run. The mind and emotions are wired to keep things familiar, sticking with what's known rather than risking uncertainty. So the same mistakes replay like a loop, making real change feel almost impossible. Alex's experience reflects a common human challenge. Many people unknowingly operate under this invisible software of old habits and beliefs. Changing these patterns isn't about willpower alone. It requires rewiring the inner system that controls automatic responses. Without understanding this, efforts to change can feel like pushing against an invisible force, leading to repeated setbacks and disappointment. The way Alex's mind works can be compared to an old computer running outdated software. Just as a computer operating system needs updates to fix bugs and improve performance, our internal belief system sometimes needs an upgrade. If the software is old, it won't process new inputs correctly, causing crashes or errors. In the same way, the subconscious mind clings to old rules and defense mechanisms that made sense in the past, but now limit growth and well-being. Think of self-sabotage as a kind of old operating system that keeps running, even when its protective functions have become obstacles. These defenses were put in place to shield us from pain, rejection, or overwhelm, acting like a thick skin. Just as a snake sheds its skin to allow new growth, people need to shed these worn-out patterns to make room for healthier, more adaptive ways of thinking and behaving. This shedding process is rarely comfortable. Old protective layers are familiar and can create a false sense of safety. Letting go feels like vulnerability, and the system initially resists change because it fears exposure to uncertainty or emotional pain. Yet, without this process, growth cannot occur. Updating the operating system means being willing to confront discomfort and replace outdated rules with new ones, more suited to current realities and future goals. When this shift happens, the mind stops automatically reacting based on old fears or limiting beliefs. Instead, it begins to process situations with fresh perspectives, allowing more conscious choices and healthier habits to emerge. The shedding of old skins is not a one-time event, but a gradual unfolding, where each layer removed reveals more freedom and clarity. Recognizing that self-sabotage is not a failure, but a sign of an outdated internal system can change how we approach personal growth. Instead of judging or blaming ourselves, we can see these patterns as signals pointing to where an update is needed. This mindset shift opens the door to deeper self-understanding and patience with the process of change. A practical step to start this update involves paying attention to which situations trigger repeated mistakes and reflecting on what subconscious beliefs might be at play. Journaling, therapy, or mindful self-inquiry can help reveal these hidden programs. Once identified, we can challenge their accuracy and imagine new ways of responding. Over time, this rewiring rewrites the old code, allowing for new, healthier patterns to take root and flourish. The psychological resistance to growth and transformation. Many people find themselves repeating the same mistakes in life, despite knowing what they should do differently. Often, these setbacks aren't due to a lack of intelligence, effort, or willpower, but stem from an unconscious self-sabotage. For example, someone might consistently stay in unhealthy relationships, even when they recognize the patterns and want change. They may think they're simply unlucky or not capable of doing better, but deep inside, unseen forces are guiding their choices. This unconscious pattern can feel like an invisible hand that pushes them back into familiar, comfortable, yet destructive behaviors, making genuine change difficult to sustain. This cycle often happens because of an inner fear that change will lead to loss or discomfort, which the mind perceives as threats. When someone begins to grow or challenge old habits, they might experience subtle feelings of guilt, anxiety, or even anger. These emotional reactions act as barriers, preventing new behaviors from taking hold. Over time, they reinforce the familiar, even if it's harmful, because the mind prefers what it knows over the uncertainty of something new. That's why improvement can feel so frustrating. There's an emotional resistance that quietly holds people back without them even realizing it. At the core of this resistance is a psychological mechanism known as self-sabotage. It's an intricate part of the way our brains protect us from change that might threaten our current identity or sense of safety. This isn't about laziness or weakness. It's about a deeply rooted ego defense that keeps us from facing uncomfortable truths. The ego, which is our sense of ourselves, often prefers familiarity, no matter how unsatisfying or limiting it might be. To maintain this sense of stability, the mind creates hurdles, convincing us that staying the same is safer than taking the risk of growth. Many forms of self-sabotage are subtle. Some might procrastinate when faced with tasks that could lead to growth, finding distractions, or justifying why they can't move forward. Others might sabotage relationships or opportunities because they fear losing their current secure, even if unhealthy, routines. These behaviors make sense from the perspective of the subconscious. They serve as a way to avoid pain, rejection, or failure. Yet, they also trap individuals in a cycle where growth remains just out of reach, all because of this built-in psychological resistance. Understanding the nature of this resistance is a crucial step toward overcoming it. Instead of judging oneself for these behaviors, recognizing them as protective responses can create a foundation for change. It's important to see that this resistance doesn't mean you're weak or incapable. It means you're human, wired to defend your current sense of self. Becoming aware of these unconscious barriers helps in simply noticing when they show up, and with practice, gradually softening their hold. Each small moment of awareness creates space for new, healthier choices to replace the old habits driven by fear and resistance. The resistance to growth often thrives in the shadows of our subconscious, making it easy to dismiss it as laziness or stubbornness. But when we acknowledge that it's a protective mechanism, it becomes easier to work with rather than fight against. Instead of battling the resistance directly, it's more effective to gently explore the fears beneath it. For example, if you notice you are avoiding a new opportunity, ask yourself what you're afraid might happen. Are you scared of failure, rejection, losing control? Identifying these fears diminishes their power and helps you to develop a compassionate approach toward change, slowly dismantling the internal barriers that have kept you stuck. Chapter 12. Breaking Patterns with Deep Methods. Using awareness, journaling, emotional regulation, and reframing. Alex found himself caught in a familiar trap, making the same life choices that led to disappointment time and again. Whether it was a job opportunity he hesitated to pursue or a relationship he let slip away, the patterns were clear. Each misstep left him wondering why he couldn't break free from these circumstances. The internal dialogue often revolved around self-doubt and fear, whispering that he was unworthy or incapable. These thoughts shaped his responses, leading him back to old habits and choices that didn't serve him. Each time Alex stumbled, he felt as though he were dissecting the same fragile narrative. Was it bad luck, or was something deeper at play? Self-sabotage can be an invisible force, affecting decisions without us realizing it. Alex's experiences exemplify how we can become stuck in a cycle driven by unconscious beliefs. These thoughts can manifest in hesitation or avoidance, ultimately steering us away from opportunities. Recognizing these patterns requires a keen sense of awareness. The first step is to notice when these negative thoughts arise instead of brushing them aside or allowing them to fester unchecked. Awareness creates a foundation for change, enabling us to confront what lies beneath the surface. One effective method for gaining insight is journaling. By putting pen to paper, Alex could examine his thoughts and feelings. Journaling serves as a safe space to unravel complex emotions and challenge the narratives he had accepted as truth. For example, after reflecting on a missed opportunity, he might write about the fears that held him back. This practice not only fosters self-discovery, but also illuminates the patterns that lead to repeated mistakes. Emotional regulation is another crucial component of breaking free from self-sabotage. Alex learned to pause and assess his emotional state rather than reacting impulsively. When anxiety crept in, he practiced deep breathing techniques or mindfulness exercises to ground himself in the present moment. This shift allowed him to respond to situations thoughtfully, rather than being driven by unchecked emotions. Developing this skill takes time, but it empowers individuals to approach life with a clearer mind and a stronger sense of control. Reframing is equally important in changing the way we perceive our experiences. Instead of viewing setbacks as failures, Alex started to see them as learning opportunities. This shift in perspective encouraged him to embrace a growth mindset. For instance, if he didn't receive a job offer, he reframed the situation by considering it a chance to refine his skills or explore new avenues. By adopting this positive lens, he reduced the sting of rejection and opened himself up to new possibilities. Ultimately, using awareness, journaling, emotional regulation, and reframing provides a toolkit for breaking free from destructive patterns. Alex's journey reflects the power of these strategies to transform how we engage with our emotions and choices. Rather than feeling trapped by the past, individuals can cultivate a sense of hope and agency in their lives. A practical step for anyone wanting to start this journey is to set aside a few minutes each day for journaling. Reflecting on daily experiences can gradually reveal the patterns that hold us back and prompt the change needed for growth. Personal story illustrating pattern breaking. For years, Mark found himself trapped in the same frustrating cycle. No matter how hard he tried to change, he would make the same mistakes over and over again. He would start a new job with enthusiasm, only to feel overwhelmed after a few weeks and quit without giving it a fair chance. Relationships began with hope, but often ended because he pushed people away when things got vulnerable. Each time Mark looked back, he felt confused about why things didn't work out. The pattern wasn't just in his career or his friendships. It played out in how he handled stress, money, and even his own health. He wanted to understand what was holding him back, but felt stuck, as if invisible forces guided his choices without his full awareness. Looking around, Mark saw others making similar mistakes too, but what made his experience unique was the sheer frustration and self-blame that followed. Deep down, he wondered if this was his fault. Was he lazy, weak, or simply not smart enough? These questions weighed heavily on him. Over time, the repeated disappointments started to wear down his confidence, making change seem almost impossible. Despite knowing exactly what he wanted to do differently, his actions didn't reflect those intentions. The gap between his desires and his behaviors grew wider, and Mark sensed that there had to be something more than just a lack of willpower causing this disconnect. Mark's story is a clear example of self-sabotage playing out on a deep level. This isn't about laziness or ignorance. It's a much more complex process that happens beneath the surface of conscious thought. Often, patterns like his come from unconscious habits shaped by past experiences, fears, and protective mechanisms built early in life. These mechanisms may have helped Mark cope at one point, but now they hold him back in subtle ways. When he tried to stay in a job or a relationship, those old, hidden parts of his mind triggered feelings of discomfort, doubt, or fear, quietly pushing him toward familiar but harmful choices. Breaking free from these cycles wasn't easy for Mark, but he learned that recognizing the unconscious origin of his struggles was the key step. Instead of blaming himself for failure, he started to see the patterns as signals rather than flaws. For example, one turning point came when Mark accepted that his habit of quitting early wasn't due to lack of commitment, but stemmed from a fear of failure he hadn't fully faced. This fear had roots in childhood experiences where he felt judged or not good enough. Understanding this helped Mark approach his challenges with more compassion and curiosity instead of criticism. Gradually, Mark began experimenting with small changes, like pausing before reacting to stress or questioning why he felt the urge to leave a situation. He practiced being aware of those old triggers and reminding himself that new actions could create different results. This process required patience and persistence, but over time, it gave him the space to create new, healthier habits. Mark's journey shows that pattern breaking happens not through willpower alone, but through gentle observation, self-awareness, and a willingness to rewrite internal stories that no longer serve. Deep work beyond surface-level advice. Imagine someone who starts each morning with good intentions, planners filled out, goals set, and a fresh commitment to focus. Yet, by mid-afternoon, they find themselves distracted, jumping from one task to another, feeling frustrated and unproductive. This pattern repeats week after week, despite their efforts to improve. Often, this person isn't truly stuck because they lack motivation. Instead, they unconsciously fall into familiar habits. The same habits keep sabotaging their productivity, creating a cycle of surface-level fixes that never really address the root of the problem. Many people rely on common advice for deep work: turn off notifications, set specific time blocks, create a distraction-free zone. While these tips can help, they often only scratch the surface. Real change requires recognizing the deeper patterns that drive distraction and resistance. For example, someone might claim they can't resist checking social media, but at a deeper level, they might be avoiding a difficult task or fear failure. Addressing these underlying feelings and motivations is essential for breaking out of unproductive cycles. Instead of trying to fight distraction externally, the focus should be on understanding what triggers these patterns and why they persist. One effective way to go beyond superficial advice is to look at your daily routines and question their origins. Are they truly serving your goals, or have they become automatic habits that no longer reflect your intentions? For instance, sitting at the same cluttered desk might seem harmless, but if it's associated with checking emails every 5 minutes, it keeps you in a reactive state. Changing these routines involves more than moving your workspace. It means reprogramming the habits that guide your attention. This could mean introducing new rituals that promote concentration, like a short meditation before starting work, or breaking tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. Such strategies help you build new patterns that support genuine focus rather than merely managing surface-level distractions. Deep work beyond superficial advice also involves confronting internal resistance head-on. It's common to feel resistance when starting a challenging task. This is often rooted in fear of failure, perfectionism, or simply boredom. Recognizing these feelings instead of dismissing them allows for more authentic engagement. One method is to ask yourself why you're avoiding the work. Sometimes, simply acknowledging that avoidance reflects discomfort can be enough to push past it. For example, if you're hesitant to write a report because you fear it won't be perfect, remind yourself that completing a rough draft is better than endless revision. Developing awareness of emotional triggers and learning to manage or reframe them can help you build resilience against unconscious self-sabotage patterns that block deep work. Another aspect of going beyond surface advice is adjusting your environment to support your goals on a deeper level. It's not just about turning off apps or cleaning your workspace temporarily. It's about creating a physical and mental space that encourages sustained focus. This might mean establishing a dedicated workspace that your brain recognizes as a place for deep effort, or setting boundaries with colleagues or family to protect time. Eliminating subtle cues that pull your attention away over the long term requires ongoing awareness and intentionality. Practicing mindfulness or regular reflection on your work habits can uncover hidden patterns and unconscious habits that hinder progress. Over time, these adjustments can help you develop a more automatic tendency to enter a state of deep work when needed, rather than continuously battling superficial distractions. Finally, meaningful deep work demands a willingness to face discomfort and challenge long-standing beliefs about productivity. Sometimes, this means dropping the myth that multitasking is effective or that constantly checking your phone shows productivity. Real change comes from consciously choosing one task at a time and sticking to it, even when it feels difficult. Developing new habits often feels uncomfortable initially, but consistency over time rewires your brain to favor focus over distraction. Instead of relying solely on external rules, cultivate internal discipline rooted in an honest understanding of your patterns. Recognizing that deep work is as much about internal choices as external conditions can lead to more lasting, genuine improvements in your ability to focus deeply and work effectively beyond the surface level. Chapter 13. Building a Self That No Longer Sabotages. How Healing Shifts Identity and Self-Perception. Imagine someone named Alex, who constantly finds themselves in the same painful situations. In relationships, they feel drawn to partners who ultimately disappoint them. Financially, no matter the effort put into saving or budgeting, unexpected expenses always seem to arise, leading to stress and frustration. With every new attempt to form healthier habits, whether that's eating better or exercising regularly, they fall back into old routines, leaving them feeling defeated. Every time this cycle repeats, Alex feels more trapped, as if a part of them believes that happiness and stability are simply out of reach. This repetitive cycle is often rooted in deeper issues that go unnoticed. Most people don't realize that their actions stem from an unconscious mechanism that affects their choices and behaviors. Alex's self-sabotage isn't about laziness or a lack of intelligence. It comes from ingrained beliefs about their worth and who they are. Each setback reinforces the same negative story they've been telling themselves, that they're not deserving of true happiness or success, and therefore, they unconsciously act in ways that fulfill that belief. Self-sabotage operates like a hidden program in our minds, running in the background and influencing our decisions without our awareness. These patterns are often set early in life, shaped by experiences, relationships, and social messaging. For Alex, phrases heard in childhood like, "You'll never succeed," or "You're always messing things up," began to carve out a negative belief system. Over time, these beliefs solidified into the core of their identity, creating an internal narrative that justifies repeated failures. This internal narrative can manifest in various ways. Some individuals might avoid challenging opportunities because, deep down, they feel unworthy. Others may sabotage their relationships because they're convinced they aren't lovable or fear being abandoned. When Alex encounters a chance to thrive, something within them triggers a reminder of their perceived failures, causing them to retreat. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward healing, as it's essential to understand that these beliefs can be challenged and changed. Through healing, Alex can learn to observe their responses and question the origin of their self-sabotage. They can start to rewrite their beliefs and reshape their identity. For many, this journey begins with self-compassion and understanding. Rather than beating themselves up for their past, they learn to acknowledge their experiences and the fears influencing their actions. By doing so, they create space for new behaviors and self-perceptions that foster healthier relationships, better financial decisions, and positive habits. A practical approach can be to maintain a journal, allowing space to reflect on feelings and thoughts as they encounter different life situations. Identifying patterns is crucial, as it provides insight into why certain choices are made. With time and practice, Alex can transition from a mindset plagued by self-sabotage to one that embraces growth, self-acceptance, and endless possibilities, creating a safe internal environment for growth. Imagine a person named Sarah who finds herself stuck in a cycle of repeating mistakes. Each time she tries to build healthy relationships, her efforts unravel in the same ways. She struggles with managing money, often finding unexpected bills or poor spending decisions that leave her feeling stressed. Even her daily habits don't seem to improve. Whenever she starts a new routine, she soon falls back into old habits that hold her back. This pattern leaves Sarah frustrated and confused, making her wonder why she can't move forward despite her best intentions. What Sarah experiences is common. Many people trip over the same obstacles repeatedly without fully understanding why. They feel stuck in a loop of mistakes, unable to free themselves from behaviors that cause pain or missed opportunities. Often, this isn't a sign of weakness or a lack of willpower. Instead, it stems from something hidden inside, the deep part of the mind that operates beneath conscious thought. These recurring difficulties reveal how the internal environment, shaped by beliefs and past experiences, affects personal growth and decision-making. Self-sabotage happens when a part of the mind works against conscious goals. It looks like making choices that harm progress, but they are actually learned responses shaped by past experiences. For example, if someone grew up in an environment where success led to criticism or punishment, they might unconsciously avoid achieving it. This is not because they want to fail or because they lack intelligence or effort. Rather, this pattern reflects a protective mechanism, one that was originally meant to keep them safe from emotional pain. This unconscious drive can appear in various ways like procrastination, self-doubt, or destructive habits. These behaviors may feel automatic and clash with what a person truly wants. Recognizing that self-sabotage is a learned response helps remove blame and opens the door to change. It takes time to gently unlearn these patterns and create a new internal environment where growth is possible. Understanding the roots of these responses is the first step to building a more supportive inner space. Building a safe internal environment involves treating yourself as you would a close friend. It means offering patience during setbacks and kindness rather than harsh criticism. When the mind feels safe, it becomes easier to face challenges and take risks needed for growth. This safety starts with self-awareness, noticing when old patterns appear without reacting with self-judgment. Over time, this awareness becomes a tool to interrupt harmful cycles and choose a different path. Another aspect is adopting a curious and forgiving stance toward your own mistakes. Instead of seeing them as proof of failure, view them as signals guiding you toward deeper understanding. This mindset reduces fear of failure, allowing you to experiment and learn without pressure. A simple example is shifting from thinking, "I messed up again," to "this shows me what I need to work on." Such changes in self-talk reshape the internal environment, making it one where growth feels safe and achievable. To foster this safe space inside, start by paying attention to your inner dialogue. Notice the language you use with yourself and try to replace harsh or negative phrases with gentle, encouraging ones. When faced with a setback, pause and reflect rather than react impulsively. This pause creates a moment to choose responses that support your goals. Additionally, building routines that reinforce positive habits and self-care strengthens your sense of stability and safety. It is also helpful to connect with supportive people who reinforce your efforts rather than undermine them. Talking openly about your struggles can lessen shame and provide new perspectives. Remember, creating a safe internal environment is a gradual process. Each time you respond to yourself with care and understanding, you weaken old patterns and make space for new ways of thinking and acting that contribute to lasting growth. Steps toward becoming someone who doesn't sabotage. Imagine someone named Mark who keeps finding himself in toxic relationships, constantly losing money despite promising to save, and struggling with habits he knows are unhelpful. Time after time, he makes the same mistakes, feeling confused and frustrated because nothing seems to change. Often, he simply blames himself or reasons that he's just unlucky. But beneath these repeated failures lies a pattern many people share, one rooted not in laziness or stupidity, but in a hidden force working against their success. Mark's story reflects a common human experience, acting in ways that undermine our own hopes and goals without even realizing it. Understanding why this happens starts with recognizing what self-sabotage truly is. It's not always a conscious decision to ruin oneself, but an unconscious mechanism designed to protect us from perceived pain or danger. Many people associate self-sabotage with laziness or lack of motivation, but it's more complex. For example, someone might avoid a promotion at work because they fear failure or rejection, even though they desperately want to succeed. Deep inside, fear can feel overwhelming enough to trigger behaviors that derail progress, such as procrastination, self-doubt, or pushing away opportunities. Realizing that these acts are rooted in fear rather than stupidity or weakness opens the door to making meaningful change. In order to move toward a future free from self-destructive tendencies, it's essential first to observe your patterns. Notice when you are about to make a decision that might undermine your goals. Are you hesitating before taking a step? Do you find yourself avoiding certain tasks or interactions? Recognizing these moments marks the beginning of change. Start by asking simple questions. Why am I doing this? What am I afraid will happen if I don't? Often, answers reveal underlying fears: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of success, or even fear of losing control. Acknowledging these fears isn't a sign of weakness, but a step toward understanding your own mind better. Beyond recognizing your triggers, it's helpful to develop practical strategies to counteract self-sabotaging behaviors. One approach is to set clear, achievable goals and break large tasks into manageable steps. When the process feels less daunting, it reduces the chance of feeling overwhelmed or giving up. Also, creating a supportive environment can make a big difference. This might include limiting negative influences, seeking encouragement from trusted friends or mentors, and practicing self-compassion when setbacks occur. Instead of beating yourself up for mistakes, treat them as learning opportunities. Remember, change doesn't happen overnight. Progress often involves small, consistent efforts, and patience with yourself makes all the difference. Another useful tip is to replace negative self-talk with more supportive and realistic thoughts. Instead of thinking, "I always mess up," try saying, "I sometimes struggle, but I am capable of learning and improving." Over time, this shift helps to reprogram your inner dialogue, making self-doubt less powerful. Building awareness and kindness towards yourself makes it easier to face difficult feelings without resorting to behaviors that keep you stuck. Eventually, as you develop new habits and beliefs, acting in your best interest becomes the default rather than an exception. Becoming someone who doesn't sabotage involves patience, practice, and a willingness to see yourself with new, more compassionate eyes. Chapter 14. The Future Self Blueprint. Envisioning and embodying a future version of oneself. Every story has its protagonist, and in this case, let's meet Jamie. Jamie is a regular person who, despite having great potential, finds themselves in the same challenging situations time and again. Relationships seem to start out ideally, yet somehow always end in unresolved conflict. Financially, Jamie is caught in a cycle of overspending, often leading to stress and regret. And when it comes to habits, despite their best intentions, Jamie often defaults to old ways that hinder growth. These recurring patterns can be frustrating and exhausting, but they are not uncommon. Many people experience similar struggles, wondering why they keep making the same choices despite knowing better. In Jamie's case, the desire to change exists, but something keeps them anchored in place. Friends frequently comment on Jamie's potential and capability, yet Jamie remains stuck in a loop of familiar disappointments. This situation raises questions about what drives these repeated life mistakes and how someone can break free from them. It's important to recognize that these patterns are rarely random. They often point to deeper issues in mindset and behavior that have been shaped over years of experiences. Self-sabotage can be a difficult concept to grasp because it feels so contradictory. Why would someone choose to undermine their own happiness or success? Understanding that these behaviors are often unconscious is crucial. Jamie, for instance, is not making these choices out of laziness or a lack of capability. Instead, self-sabotage often springs from ingrained beliefs and fears that whisper quietly in the background, shaping decision-making processes without conscious awareness. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward change. By bringing awareness to why certain behaviors occur, Jamie can begin to unravel the deep-seated beliefs that underlie their actions. Building new patterns requires patience and persistence. It involves examining past experiences and understanding how they shape present behavior. The journey can be challenging, but it is also an opportunity for profound personal growth. To break free from self-sabotage and actively shape a better future, practical steps are essential. First, envision the future self Jamie aspires to be. This vision should be vivid and specific, drawing an engaging picture that feels real. What does this future version of Jamie do differently? How does this version approach relationships, finances, and habits? Taking time to write this vision down makes it tangible. Visualizing success reinforces the belief that change is possible. Next, identifying the barriers standing in the way of this future self is important. Journaling can be a powerful tool here. Jamie can write down specific moments when they felt compelled to sabotage their progress. Analyzing those instances reveals patterns and triggers, paving the way for change. Instead of acting on impulse during those moments, Jamie can learn to pause and reflect, creating space for healthier choices. Finally, surrounding oneself with supportive people can make a world of difference. Positive relationships provide encouragement and accountability, helping Jamie stay focused on the path to their envisioned future. Reaching out to friends, family, or even support groups can provide the necessary boost and perspective needed to push through challenging times. Embracing this journey allows for a richer, more satisfying life. Practical steps for rewriting behavior through future self-modeling. Imagine someone named Sarah who keeps finding herself trapped in the same patterns. She jumps into relationships full of hope, only to break up when things get tough. Financially, she struggles with impulsive spending, despite wanting stability. Her daily habits also seem to resist change, whether it's health, work, or personal goals. Each time she asks herself why she can't break free, the answer escapes her. The frustrating truth is that Sarah isn't deliberately doing these things to ruin her life. Instead, she's acting out unconscious scripts that repeat over and over, shaping her actions without her awareness. This makes her mistakes feel like a mystery, as if she's caught in a loop that she can't exit. What Sarah experiences is a clear example of unconscious self-sabotage, where the mind silently pushes her toward familiar but unhelpful choices. Self-sabotage doesn't happen because someone is lazy or lacks intelligence. Instead, it usually comes from deep, hidden parts of the mind shaped by past experiences and learned identities. From childhood or significant life events, people develop ways to protect themselves emotionally by repeating certain patterns that feel safe, even if they cause harm. These patterns become like autopilot habits, guiding decisions without conscious thought. The actions that seem damaging are actually attempts to hold on to an identity formed long ago. Changing this isn't about willpower alone. It requires reshaping these automatic behaviors. This is where the idea of rewriting behavior through future self-modeling comes in. By creating a clear, vivid picture of who you want to become and practicing stepping into that version of yourself mentally and emotionally, you can gradually rewire those old patterns and build new pathways that lead to healthier choices. Inspiring examples of future self-integration. Imagine meeting someone who seemed stuck in a pattern that repeated across different areas of life, romantic relationships, financial habits, and daily routines. This person, let's call him Alex, often found himself making the same mistakes, but he struggled to see why. No matter how much he wanted to change, those old behaviors kept pulling him back. He would approach new situations with hope, only to fall into familiar traps that he couldn't quite explain or control. His story is common, yet it's also a starting point for understanding how the future self can become a guiding force for real change. Alex's repetitive setbacks highlight a deeper truth that many don't recognize at first. Our current habits are often rooted in unconscious beliefs and fears. These aren't simply a matter of laziness or lack of effort. Instead, they reflect learned patterns that operate beneath everyday awareness. These behaviors act as a kind of autopilot, steering us toward familiar outcomes even when they don't serve us well. Seeing someone like Alex work through this process can be inspiring because it shows that transformation isn't about never making mistakes, but about gradually rewriting the scripts that drive our actions. One of the most powerful examples of future self-integration is a person who has learned to recognize the voice of their highest aspirations and actively aligns daily choices with long-term goals. Take Sarah, for example. She once struggled with self-doubt that kept her from pursuing her passions or stepping outside her comfort zone. Over time, she began practicing mental exercises to visualize her best future self. She created a clear picture of who she wanted to become, more confident, healthier, and more assertive. As these images became more vivid, she started making small decisions each day that aligned with that vision, slowly but surely building a new identity rooted in her ideal future self. In another example, consider Marcus, who used to fight a constant battle with procrastination. His future self, he imagined, was someone who completed projects on time, felt less stress, and enjoyed a sense of accomplishment. Rather than relying solely on motivation, Marcus used habits and environmental cues to support his growth. He set up his workspace to minimize distractions and committed to starting tasks at specific times, even when he didn't feel like it. Over weeks, these small adjustments helped Marcus feel more in control, and he began to see himself as a disciplined person, someone who could bring his future ambitions into present reality. Some people's stories portray a more dramatic turnaround. Think of Lisa, who once saw herself as a failure in her career and personal life, constantly sabotaging her chances for success. Her turning point came when she decided to consciously connect with her future self, someone who was resilient, resourceful, and fulfilled. She started journaling as her future self, writing letters to her current self filled with encouragement and advice. This practice created a bridge between her present limitations and her desired future, transforming her internal narrative. Over time, Lisa's actions aligned more with her new identity, and her confidence blossomed. Her story demonstrates how intentional mental shifts can foster the integration of the future self into everyday life. Inspiration also comes from stories of people who see setbacks as opportunities for growth rather than signs of failure. Consider Tom, who faced repeated struggles with anger and impulsiveness. Instead of beating himself up, he focused on envisioning a calmer, more patient version of himself. He practiced mindfulness and self-awareness, which allowed him to catch reactive impulses early. As he kept practicing, Tom experienced a shift. His responses became more thoughtful and less automatic. This ongoing process of aligning with his future self not only improved his relationships, but also gave him a sense of hope that change is possible, even after years of setbacks. These examples show that change is often a gradual process, built from small victories that reinforce a new identity. Incorporating future self-visualization, creating supportive habits, and cultivating self-compassion make it easier to stay connected with this evolving version of oneself. The key is consistency, not perfection. Every effort to act in accordance with the future self, no matter how minor, cements the new identity and makes it more real. Keeping track of progress and celebrating small wins can motivate continued growth and deepened this integration over time. Practicing patience and kindness with oneself is also crucial. When setbacks occur, seeing them as part of the learning curve rather than failures makes it easier to maintain focus on long-term transformation. Remember, no one becomes their ideal future self overnight. It's a journey of small, persistent steps that eventually weave together into a new way of being. Paying attention to these examples can inspire ongoing commitment, showing that change is not just possible, but well within reach through deliberate action and mental clarity. Chapter 15: The Lifestyle of Inner Peace and Self-Respect. Routines, Boundaries, and Self-Care Practices. Once there was a woman named Sarah who seemed to be on a constant loop of missteps. Every January, she would set big goals: to eat healthier, to exercise more, and to focus on her mental well-being. But by March, her enthusiasm would dwindle. She found herself skipping workouts, falling back into unhealthy eating habits, and feeling overwhelmed with work and life responsibilities. Despite her best intentions, Sarah felt confused as the same pattern replayed year after year. She often wondered why she couldn't maintain these positive changes. Frustration grew as she watched her friends thrive while she felt stuck in a never-ending cycle of self-doubt and regret. Many people, like Sarah, do not realize that self-sabotage often stems from deeper emotional issues rather than simple laziness. For Sarah, it wasn't that she didn't want to be healthy or happy. Rather, her unconscious fears of failure and success played a significant role in her repeated setbacks. Each time she attempted to change her habits, a part of her would resist. This resistance often manifested as distractions or the impulse to avoid commitments. Sarah might rationalize her choices, telling herself she'd work out another day or that a quick snack wouldn't hurt. These small decisions chipped away at her resolve, leaving her feeling more disheartened each time. Self-sabotage can be a complex web of conflicting desires and fears, revealing itself through procrastination or avoidance. Understanding these triggers is crucial to breaking free from the cycle of disappointment and self-doubt. Recognizing that self-sabotage is not merely a sign of a lack of willpower is the first step in cultivating healthier routines and boundaries. It invites individuals to reflect on their underlying fears that may influence their behaviors. Sarah needed to look beyond her feelings of laziness or frustration to understand her emotional landscape. By identifying the roots of her self-sabotaging behaviors, she could start to dismantle the barriers that had been holding her back. Establishing clearer boundaries with her time, focusing on self-care practices that nourished her mind and body, and developing a structured yet flexible routine could help her achieve the changes she sought. Living with integrity and inner peace. There was a man named James who found himself trapped in the same patterns over and over again. Every time he started a new job, he would initially feel hopeful and motivated, but after a few months, disappointment and frustration crept in. He would miss deadlines, avoid difficult conversations, and find excuses to backslide into old habits. In his relationships, this pattern repeated too. He would promise change, but later fall back into familiar behaviors that caused conflict and heartbreak. Despite recognizing these problems, James couldn't understand why the same mistakes happened time and again. He felt stuck in a loop without a clear reason, punishing himself for his failures, but never addressing the real cause beneath the surface. This cycle of self-sabotage left him feeling exhausted, blaming external factors or others while the true source remained hidden deep inside. Self-sabotage often happens without us realizing it. It's a way the mind unconsciously protects itself from difficult feelings or changes that seem scary. When someone like James continuously repeats the same mistakes, it usually points to unresolved inner conflicts. These conflicts emerge from opposing desires, fears, or beliefs that clash inside a person's mind. For example, James might want success and happiness, but at the same time, He could be afraid of failing or not feeling worthy of those things. This tension creates an internal struggle, which manifests as actions and decisions that undermine his goals, even when he consciously wants the opposite. Living with integrity means acting in alignment with your true values and beliefs, but self-sabotage pulls you away from that path. When inner conflicts dominate, it becomes hard to stay consistent because part of you is working against your own best interests. It can lead to feelings of guilt, confusion, and unrest, making it difficult to find inner peace. Understanding these hidden struggles is a key step toward better self-awareness. When you begin to recognize the reasons behind your patterns, it allows you to confront fears and beliefs that once lived in the shadows. This creates space for healing and change, slowly building habits that support living honestly with yourself and others. James's experience is common, as many people face similar battles beneath the surface. The mind often chooses familiar discomfort over unknown possibilities, even if that means repeating harmful cycles. To break free from this, awareness of the unconscious motives behind self-sabotage is necessary. It's also helpful to approach yourself with kindness instead of judgment, exploring what drives your actions and seeking small shifts toward authenticity. This process opens a path toward integrity, where who you are inside matches how you show up in the world, leading eventually to a calm and peaceful sense of self that doesn't get caught in the endless cycle of mistakes. Final powerful reflection on transformation. Think about someone who keeps finding themselves in the same struggles, no matter how much they try to change. Maybe they chase new routines or set fresh goals, but somehow they end up repeating old patterns. They might feel frustration or confusion, wondering why real change is so elusive. Often, what's happening isn't just a matter of willpower. It's a deeper, subconscious part of the mind working behind the scenes, guiding behavior without conscious awareness. This cycle is common but rarely acknowledged because it's so ingrained that it feels automatic. Recognizing these familiar patterns for what they are opens the door to real understanding and, ultimately, genuine change. Understanding that self-sabotage is often an unconscious response makes a big difference. When we see our reactions, habits, and choices as stemming from hidden beliefs or unresolved conflicts, it becomes easier to address them with compassion rather than blame. True transformation begins when we accept that change isn't just about willpower, but about becoming aware of the subconscious forces that shape us. This awareness gives us the ability to pause, ask questions, and choose differently, rather than reacting out of old programming. Over time, this kind of insight creates a sense of inner peace, as we stop fighting ourselves and start understanding ourselves more deeply. Reflection shows us how powerful the subconscious mind is in shaping our lives. Small shifts in awareness can ripple outward, slowly dismantling those repeating patterns. For example, noticing a pattern of procrastination or self-doubt allows us to investigate what lies beneath it. Is it fear of failure? Feelings of unworthiness? When we identify these root causes, we can work on healing or reshaping belief systems. The process often involves patience and kindness, recognizing that change is gradual, not instant. Celebrating small successes along the way reinforces commitment and builds confidence. In the end, genuine transformation isn't about extreme overhauls, but about ongoing awareness and gentle self-improvement. One practical reminder is that progress is rarely linear. You might slip back into old habits at times, but that doesn't mean failure. Instead, view setbacks as part of the learning curve. Each stumble offers an opportunity to see what's still triggering old responses. Over time, consistent reflection and self-compassion help rewire those automatic reactions. Remember, it's less about getting it right and more about staying committed to growth, even when the road feels bumpy. Small, Conscious choices made consistently have a cumulative power that can reshape your life in ways you never thought possible. Focusing on progress rather than perfection turns every experience, good or bad, into a stepping stone toward lasting change. Conclusion: becoming your own ally. You've walked through the shadows. You've traced the outlines of your inner critic, your fears, your trauma loops, your defenses, your comfort addictions, your identity wounds. You've seen the machinery behind your self-sabotage. And now you understand. Your mind never tried to hurt you. It tried to protect you with strategies that were built when you were too young to choose better ones. But now, you can choose. You can choose the future self you want to build. You can choose patterns that match who you're becoming, not who you used to be. You can choose to treat yourself like someone worth fighting for. Self-sabotage loses its power the moment you stop being its accomplice. From here on, every tiny act of consistency, every boundary, every moment of self-honesty, every uncomfortable step forward rewires the story of your life. You don't rise all at once. You rise like dawn, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Let this be the moment where you stop standing in your own way. Let this be the moment where you switch sides in the war within. Let this be the moment where you become someone you can trust. And when self-sabotage shows up again, because it will, you'll recognize it instantly. You won't fall for the trick anymore. You'll smile, breathe, and say, "I'm on my own team now." Thank you for reading. And more importantly, thank you for choosing yourself.